quickly take this opportunity to thank INMO, all at INMO Professional, and of course Roisin O'Connell, our Studio Graduate Officer, who have excelled themselves in preparation for today. I also wish to thank Core Market for their ongoing support, particularly in terms of minding your mental health as new graduates. And, we will hear more from them on this topic later on. Colleagues, to graduate is a very proud moment for you all, but to be graduating on the back of a global pandemic is truly amazing. The commitment you have shown throughout has been astounding and nothing short of a miracle. You all have shown true grit and resilience in such difficult times. I acknowledge your integrity and passion for the profession, as your group have been challenged in every way possible and have prevailed. COVID-19 has changed how we work, and we recognise the contribution that you and your colleagues have made to members in our professions during the pandemic, and more generally, we thank you most sincerely for that. Members of this organisation fought hard for the pandemic grant, and I know the payment of this is still an ongoing issue, but one we will keep the pressure on. Your organisation has made extensive written and oral submission in relation to the long-term review of financial supports for students, and I lend my full support to that progressing. This is the very least you deserve in what has been a very trying time. There are and have always been challenges for nursing and midwifery, but this is such an exciting time as well for our professions. You're graduates with the skills, knowledge and competencies which will make real differences to the lives of so many people and to our health services. You will impact people you meet every day, and the developments in our professions means that the impact you will make is increasing every day. Never be afraid to be proud of your profession and who you are. Never be afraid to be the advocate for your patients, and never be afraid to extend your wings and reach for your goals to improve yourself and your services. You are our future, and we will always, as an organisation and colleagues, be beside you. We will be with you and protecting you. So I urge you to be the best that you can and enjoy your career and the future. I am pleased to present a fantastic lineup of speakers today, and I look forward to participating on a panel discussion later on. Colleagues, you are starting your careers, so to be armoured with the right information and entitlements so early on will stand to you for a very strong career. So thank you for your attention this morning, and it gives me great pleasure as your president to formally open this webinar, and I hand you back now to our graduate officer, Roisin O'Connell, who will be chairing this morning's sessions. Thank you, Roisin.
Thank you so much, Karen. Really appreciate that. So we're going to head now to our first speaker, which is David Miskell. So David Miskell is the Professional and Regulatory Services Officer in the Professional and Regulatory Services Department of the INMO. David provides advice and representation to members who are subject to fitness to practice complaints at the Preliminary Proceedings Committee and inquiry stages of the process. He also provides advice and representation to senior nursing and midwifery managers regarding their terms and conditions of employment. David has quite an extensive background. He has a BA and an LLB from NUI Galway, a Master's in Industrial Relations from Smurfit Business School, and a Diploma in Professional Regulation from UCD. And before all that, he was an RGN who completed his nursing in Tala Hospital and Trinity College. So David, I'm going to let you take over if you want to share your screen.
Thank you, Rosie, and good morning all. So perhaps if everyone could let me know if they can see.
Yes, David, we can see. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Roisin, and indeed to our president, Karen, and all the wonderful work that she does. So Roisin has given a little bit of background to me, so I'm just going to give you a short presentation on the issue of, I suppose, what has your union ever done for you? Now, in posing that question, I suppose what I want to do is perhaps go through some two key achievements over our lengthy history. Purposes of it is not, I suppose, to give everyone a history lesson, but I think in order to truly understand what the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation has done for our professions, I think these are matters that need need to be highlighted just to provide you with some insight into the nature of our work. Just by way of some background, we were founded in 1919. A small group of nurses and midwives came together to address issues around pay and the setting of professional standards for the professions of nursing and midwifery. That, I suppose, first effective standardization of salaries was achieved during this period, and there's a recognition of the necessity to standardize working hours at 96 per fortnight, as it was at that time, and that ultimately came about some years after that. Even as far back as then, impetus was given to the issue of university recognition and the introduction of postgraduate courses in teaching and administration at university level. The purposes, I suppose, of that was the long and lengthy campaign to ensure that our professions were on the same level, both educational and professional, as other professions. And it was at that point that that long campaign began. In the 1950s, there was an establishment of an inclusive salary scale for hospital nurses, introduction of some diploma courses and tutors, which would have university recognition in conjunction with onboard alternates, which is an entity that we engage with regularly on your behalf as part of our function and remit. In 1966, for example, the Minister for Health at that time announced the implementation of an 85-hour week or 85-hour fortnight for nurses and a 90-hour week for student nurses at the time. And there were some further improvements in relation to the standardization of annual leave. At that time, we were engaged with, I suppose, onboard alternates in relation to funding that was to be made available, some new syllabus, and ensure the efficient and robust implementation of the EEC nursing directive at that time. And believe it or not, at that time, the campaign was started for the 35-hour working week. And in 1984, all staff through the INMO agreement were included at the pension on the same terms as men. Which will probably give you some insight into the perhaps unusual issues, perhaps that we wouldn't think would be relevant now, but that this was something, that these were matters that were addressed at the time. At the 39-hour week around that time was introduced, a creation of new back to nursing and midwifery courses, and ultimately it saw the implementation of the directive for requirements of the student nurse in 1990. If I mark along the road, then some key achievements, and I am being very, very broad here. The Commission on Nursing was established as part of the settlement of the nurses' dispute. You will recollect in 1999, the Commission on Nursing covered a broad range of issues and dealt with the lack, ultimately, of promotional opportunities for nurses and midwives in the profession. It was a comprehensive document at the time, and it came about by way of the 99 strike, and ultimately it changed and shaped the direction of our professions, and in many ways continues to do so. In November 2001, we secured agreement from the government to fund an undergraduate university-based 4-year degree program for nurses, and that took effect from 2002. And again, I suppose that was kind of brought into fruition a long-standing campaign of the INMO. In June 2008, a 37.5-hour working week commenced for nurses and midwives with no reduction in pay, and the Commission on the introduction of a 35-hour week also began its work in 2008. And just by way of some background for people that would have obviously been party to some of the discussions in relation to the most recent national nurses and midwives strike, it was around in 2009 when the recession hit it to a large degree, and I myself was involved in some research around the implementation of that 35-hour week at that time. From 2009, we went through a period of cutbacks, and all the hours of all public servants were increased at that time, which put back a lot of our work. I put it back significantly, but that's just an interesting insight into the background to that. At the time, then there were a number of issues arising, which was a 10.6 pay increase to correct the anomaly with childcare workers, the reduction in the working week to 35 hours, as I've said, some parity of pay with basic and managerial therapy grades. Much of this you would have heard in the current strike. And as I said, I suppose it was at that time and in them years, we got caught up in those years of recession and cutbacks, where in reality we were ameliorating the extent of the cutbacks as opposed to making progress in our agenda. But there was a number of matters there on the agenda at that time. And just to provide you with some insight as well, in 2007, we published a book of essays which were entitled Forming EU Healthcare Policy, a Showcase, which was a showcase of our involvement to celebrate our continued achievement at the national and European and international level of various European nursing organisations. And this is part of our policy remit and function. Just, I suppose, in terms of some recent developments, well, which you will have heard coming in on the back of the most recent industrial dispute, we have secured the commitment to save staffing levels, which is based on patient dependency. And this is the first time in the history of our professions that there has been a specific and research-based model to determine what safe staffing levels are. And it's ultimately based on patient dependency. That is ongoing for the acute sector, and there's currently a body of work going on in relation to the older persons services as well, which is progressing. There has been a new higher salary scale for staff nurses and midwives, and the introduction of this enhanced practice salary scale saw staff nurses and midwives receive increased pay in varying amounts, and were in terms of achieving parity. Those increases were at every point of the scale, and parity to a large degree was achieved with those therapy grades. So perhaps if you can see the link between some of our historical claims and where they got caught up in the wider political and economic environment, that particular scale is shorter now, and you will get to a higher maximum of 4 years earlier. There's been an increase in the value of the allowances by 20%, and I've included the new allowances there for the maternity, community, medical and surgical areas, which is a significant expansion of those allowances, and earlier access to the senior staff nurse or midwife scale, and speedier pay increases for new nurses and midwives who skip the second increment, and an expert review group on senior nursing and midwifery managers, and most recently, a 3.28% pay increase for those grades to match what came about by way of the enhanced practice salary scale. So I suppose, and Roisin will tell me how I'm doing for time, in posing the question again, what has your union done for you? I suppose the purposes of highlighting those things is not to provide people with a history lesson or a large list of things, a large list of industrial relations issues. But the truth of the matter is that over our 100-year history, we have always striven to advance the professions of nursing and midwifery to their current format and continue to advance them. The truth of the matter is that way back since 1919, in order to secure any type of improvements in terms of conditions, in terms of the voice of our professions, and in terms of, I suppose, where we sit in terms of our overall educational and professional development, all of those things have come about by way of nurses and midwives grouping together through their union to achieve those. In saying that, not everything has been perfect, not everything has been as quick as we like, and we have met consistently with issues along the way with resistance, but we continue to push. We continue to actively participate and influence key policy decisions at a national and European and international level through our advocacy and policy-based agenda. We continually strive to improve terms and conditions for nurses and midwives, and we will continue in that endeavour. And again, I say, to the backdrop of the current times that we are in many ways, while things change, they also stay the same in many of the issues from way back in 1919 and all the way along. are in many ways worryingly similar to the issues that we face today, such as staffing issues, burnout, morale, and pain conditions. But we will continue to do that for our members. We provide comprehensive professional services, because a key aspect of our own development is our continued professional development as nurses and midwives. And we provide our workplace representation on all collective and individual IR issues, which includes grievance and disciplinary matters. And again, it's important and vital to have with that support that you need in the workplace, and that people are there when you need it. And we provide full representation at all stages of the fitness to practice process of the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland. And we continue to advocate to NMBI on behalf of our members in relation to legislative developments. This is a very robust and comprehensive service. A potential fitness to practice case can severely impact one's livelihood and one's role, and it's vital that you have that professional and bespoke support that you need for in that type of situation. And the vast majority of our members will never come into contact with the NMBI in that context, but a lot do. And when that arises, it's important that you have access to the type of professional support and advice you need to guide you through such a situation. I'll put up one final slide, I'm supposed to make the point that we are stronger together in making a decision to join an organization like the INMO. You do a number of things. You make the decision to ensure that you yourself have the type of advice and support you need in a professional context. Everyone works very hard for their registration and qualification. It can be a hard journey. And ultimately, it's about taking that step, I suppose, to protect yourself, to ensure that if there are issues that are arising, that you have this type of advice and support you need. But it's also about being part of something. It's about being part of a wider organization that advocates and speaks up for nurses and midwives. And wherever there is a conversation at government, at local, international, national, or European level, that we are there, we are present on your behalf, and we are advocating for your interests in all settings. So that's my presentation, and thank you for listening. And I will hand you back to Roisin now. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your webinar.
Thank you so much, David. That was brilliant. So we're going to move next now, guys, to Catherine O'Connor. So she is one of the 2 information officers within the INMO. So she's going to give an outline of sources of information and what goes into a contract. So Catherine, are you ready?
I am indeed, Roisin. Thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. Please bear with me as I do the traditional bit of fumbling on a webinar. Do you think after 2 years it'd be easier to share the screen at this stage? No.
We can see that, Catherine, just so you know.
Great. Thanks very much, Roisin. So good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to this webinar today. And first of all, I suppose I want to say congratulations on getting to this point of the internship. You're right at the end now, and the light is at the end of the tunnel. Having done the general course myself and having worked as a nurse in an acute hospital in Dublin up until January 2020, I think it can be a really challenging course to do, you know, of any of the disciplines of nurse midwifery at the best of times. So particularly over the last couple of years, you would have had your, I suppose really in particular, your supernumerary placements affected by the pandemic. So I can't imagine how challenging that was, you know, on top of everything else. So fair play to you on getting to this point, and you're almost there now at the finish line. So I suppose, as Roisin said, really the purpose of today's session is to give you just an overview of where you can go for information if you're looking for things as you're a new graduate and even later into your career. And towards the end of the presentation, I'll give you my contact details, as well as my colleague, Catherine Hopkins, one of the other information officers here, so that if you do have any further queries, you can get in touch with us, and that's no problem at all. But I suppose, first off, if you're looking for information, where can you go? So in the majority of cases, the first port of call really would be your contract. A lot of information is there. We'll go through it in a minute in a little bit more detail, but it's really important that when you do get your contracts and you sign them, keep a copy for yourself in a safe place, because it could even be years down the line before you want to look for it, and you want to make sure that you know where it is. Obviously, there are employer policies and procedures. A lot of those will be on your intranets for whichever employer that you're going to, that you might be able to access while on site. Some of it might be more available online. We do have INMO publications that are on the website that are available for you to view. There's the information office. Obviously, there's the internet, but as you probably tell your patients, be careful of Dr. Google. Anytime you're looking things up online, it's just important that you have the right context, I suppose, behind what you're looking up. So in terms of the contract, there's a few different forms of contract, and a lot of time, particularly in the beginning, people might come to us and say, well, actually, I don't have a contract employment, but you would, so long as you're, someone who said that they're your employer, you're doing work for them, and you're receiving a wage or a salary from them, you are considered to have a contract of employment. Sometimes it might be oral. It's always better to get a written contract, that you have something that you can refer to down the line. And if you find that you're getting difficulty securing a written contract of employment from your employer, don't be afraid to get in touch with your official for the area, and they'll be able to assist you with speeding that process up a little bit. So I suppose you can have a few different types of contracts. So in addition to it being either written or oral, a contract can either be permanent, or sometimes it's called contract of indefinite duration. So there's not an end date, it's just viewed to be a permanent contract. You could have something called a fixed term contract. So for example, it might be for 6 months, 1 year, 18 months, something like that. Or you could have a specified purpose contract. So for that, there is going to be an end at some point, but there's not exactly a fixed date, because it might be that you're doing a research project, for example. So it's whenever that research project finishes, that's when your contract of employment will end. Or it might be the case that you're covering for someone who's absent either due to maternity leave or sick leave. So when they're going out on maternity leave or sick leave, they're not 100% sure, exactly on which date they're going to come back. But on their return, then it would be viewed that your contract of employment would end, and that would be accepted up front. It's really important to note that once a contract of employment, an offer of employment has been accepted, it cannot be withdrawn. So again, just to note that, and it's always a good idea just to have things in writing as well, that, if someone gives you a call to say they're offering you a job, that you can even just send them an email afterwards saying, dear such and such, thank you for the conversation today. I'm writing to accept my offer of employment, and then you have something to fall back on. So there's something called the Day 5 statement. Basically, it's a statement of some of the main key terms and conditions of employment that should be given to you within 5 days of beginning your post, or being, starting the work. So in that, it's fairly basic. It's things like, the name of the employer, the employee, the address of the employer, what the duration of the contract is going to be. So is it temporary, is it permanent, is it fixed term, or is it specified purpose? The rate or method of calculation of the employee's pay, or you might see it on the title remuneration. So it's just how they're going to pay you. And traditionally, there's usually the number of hours the employer reasonably expects the employee to work each week in that kind of 5-day statement. You should receive the rest of the terms and conditions of employment within 2 months of beginning your work. It is an offence if the process is being drawn out and there's no good reason for the employer not to be giving you these kind of details. Again, if you are encountering difficulties receiving the contract or the statement of terms and conditions of employment, you can always contact your union official for assistance and for advice. So in that longer written statement, in terms of the main terms and conditions of employment, again, it's doing things like the basics, the name and of the employer and the employee, the nature of the contract, commencement date. We would also go into a little bit more detail. Normally, particularly if you're in the public sector, so if you're going into a HSE or a Section 38 organisation, there will normally be reference to the annual leave entitlement, there might be reference to sick leave, the pension scheme, retirement age, notice periods in particular. That's something that people often are a little bit unsure about if they're going to be changing employers, if they're planning on moving from one area to another, and they want to know, well, what's my notice period? Traditionally, the rule of thumb would be 4 weeks for a staff nurse or a staff midwife position in the HSE, but it's always going to be written in your contract. It's really important that you go by what's written in your contract, because that's the notice period for yourself. There will also often be reference to other items in the contract. They might more so be signposting you to different policies that are there, so there'll be more detail available in other areas, but in your contract it's letting you know that there is a grievance and disciplinary procedure and things like that. Obviously there's normally a mention of confidentiality of information which you would be adhering to anyway, in terms of your patients or your clients. So in terms of what goes into the terms and conditions of employment, obviously those that I've mentioned there are the main ones that are written. Some of them may not always be written into your contract. Some of them are viewed to be implied terms. So it's something that the courts have decided that, realistically should be in every employment arrangement. So like the duty of care for every employer to provide a safe workplace, as well as the duty of every employee to carry out the job to the best of his or her ability. So you're not going to see that written down, but it's kind of taken for granted that that is in place. Some contractual terms can be provided by legislation being passed by the government. So for example, the right to maternity leave, parental leave, annual leave, these are really applying or providing the floor for the basics for what you're entitled to. Now, particularly in the public health service, you might be entitled to more than the absolute basic provided by the legislation. That would be as a result of collective bargaining. So it would be as a result of unions bargaining with the employer at the national level to secure more enhanced or more favourable terms and conditions of employment. But I suppose what's passed by the Dáil is the absolute basic in terms of what you're entitled to, and it cannot be diminished beyond that. Some of the contractual terms can be provided for in collective agreement. So like I was saying, there can also be things like the incremental credit agreement for nurses and midwives. That's basically allowing that if someone has verifiable, genuine nursing service, either abroad or maybe in the private sector, then the public sector, that time will be recognised. So that's to do with where you're being placed on the salary scale based on your experience. There's also other collective agreements like the overtime agreement, the flexible working agreement. And I suppose in terms of custom and practice, again, that's not going to be written into a contract. Really, the main example for that, I suppose, would be things like taking a 15-minute morning tea break or a 15-minute evening tea break. And so it's something that's custom and practice. It's been established in the organisation for so long, everyone just knows about it, that if there was to be a change to that, again, that would require kind of consultation and negotiation on that. So I suppose an existing contract of employment can only be varied with the agreement of both parties. So on the one hand, your employer can't unilaterally, change your contract to give you less favourable conditions. But at the same time, you can't turn around to them and write something into the side of your contract to get them to agree to, unless they actually agree with it. In terms of the employer policies and procedures, these can come from a range of different areas. So in the public sector, there's a lot of the HSE, HR circulars are available online. If you're unsure of any of them, obviously you can contact your HR department, or the INMO tend to keep, the information office tend to collate a lot of these circulars to keep a record. So we would be fairly up to date on the latest circulars that have been issued. The enhanced nurse practice or the enhanced midwifery practice salary scales, again, in that contract, there's a lot of information there. I'm not going to go into the salary scales progression there too much, because I know Roshan's going to cover it later. But I suppose just to know that these are some of the areas or the different types of policies that are out there where you can request them from your employer, and you will find an awful lot of information in them, like in your sick leave policy, your compassionate leave policy, your pensions, and so on and so forth. So in terms of the INMO publications, obviously there's the notice to members that you will get fairly regularly. So it's really important, especially now that you're students, as you're becoming new graduates, a lot of you probably have your email addresses that are registered with the INMO as being your college ones. So if you're going to keep your college email up, that's absolutely fine. You can just use that one to keep receiving the notices to members. But it's just really important that if you're going to be changing, say, from your UCC or your TCG email account to maybe your own personal Gmail one, that you use an email address that you're going to be looking at fairly regularly, so they're not going into a pile somewhere, so you are actually being kept up to date. So the WIN magazine, the World of Irish Nursing and Midwifery journal, there's an awful lot of information that's published each month. It's posted to members if they choose to opt in for that, or you can receive it just by email if you want to cut down the amount of paper post you're receiving. And again, it is really worth your while having a look through that, because a lot of updates are put in through there. There's news updates either by email or occasionally by text message. And again, there's an awful lot of information on the INMO website itself. So I suppose in terms of the information office for who we are and what we do, so I suppose we provide a same-day response service where possible. So it's between 8:30 to 5 Monday to Thursday and 8:30 to 4:30 on a Friday. So I suppose what we do is we collate an awful lot of information from different sources. So different legislation that might have been passed, HSE circulars that have been issued, and different guidance from various sources. We collate them into one area so that we do have an awful lot of information. So if you have queries on rights and entitlements, have I been put on the correct point of my salary scale? I've been offered this much annual leave, but that doesn't seem right to me. I think that they're offering me, less annual leave than I'm entitled to. You can come to us with those questions and we can advise you on those issues, or refer on to the official if it needs maybe representation at that stage. We would have the Getting It Right booklet. So that's a booklet developed for the reps. So if any of you ever are interested in becoming a rep in the future, there is training involved for that. So you do have an awful lot of information behind you. And again, one of those booklets is one of those resources. We've a lot of leaflets on different topics, so things like annual leave, allowances, sick leave. They're available on the INMO website for members. And they are really good first port of call. They're kept up to date regularly. You can see the date at the bottom of them. So again, it's just another resource that's available for you. There's the diary, which is available for reps. There's the calendar, which is posted out at the start of the year in the WIN magazine. So it looks something like this. This is obviously this year's one. It's a desk calendar, but it is really handy to keep, especially if you're in an award situation. There's an awful lot of kind of a quick guide to a lot of topics for rights and entitlements in that calendar. So it might be worthwhile just keeping an eye out for that come the new year when they're going out again. We keep an up-to-date version of the salary scales on the INMO website. And we would also go attend hospital visits for information stands occasionally. And again, we'll be involved in the INMO nurse and midwife rep training, which happens a few times each year. So I suppose in terms of those leaflets, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, but we might just go through one or two of them with you. Again, these are available on the INMO website if you do want to look back on them later on. But I suppose one of the things that jumps out to me that for new graduates that might be of particular interest to you would be your allowances. So I think David mentioned earlier on about the location allowance and the specialist qualification allowance, that these have now been extended as a result of the 2019 strike settlement. So the location allowance has been extended to medical and surgical wards that wouldn't previously have been eligible for them, and to maternity departments that wouldn't previously have been eligible. You can now apply for them. There isn't exactly an application process as such. Ideally, if you're working in an area, say for the location allowance, it's based by location, by its name, and there's a list of these locations in the leaflet on the INMO website. But if you're in one of those areas, ideally, it should just be the case that automatically you should be paid for it. But sometimes payroll just know that you're working, say, in the hospital. They don't know exactly which ward in the hospital. So it might be no harm just to contact your line manager, particularly, I suppose, your payroll department, just to let them know, look, I'm going to be working, commencing work on this date. My understanding is that I would be eligible to receive the location allowance. Just want to confirm that I would be receiving it. And then that means just, before you're starting to work as a staff nurse, that you're not going to be missing any payments. Obviously, if you do miss any payments because they haven't paid it to you when they should, you should be receiving retrospective pay or back pay for that. And you can always contact the official or the information office if you're having difficulty receiving that payment. So I suppose the location allowance is just over €2,300. The specialist qualification allowance is just over €3,500. So the criteria for the specialist qualification allowance is that you need to have done a postgraduate course that's recognised by the NMBI as being category 2 or equivalent, and your employer needs to deem that you're using that qualification, that course, in your kind of day-to-day work. So for example, if you did a gerontological postgrad course and you're working in the care of the older person setting, it would follow then that you're using that qualification in your day-to-day work. However, if you were then to move, say, to a maternity department or maybe a paediatric unit, you're not going to be using that care of the older person qualification, so therefore you wouldn't be in receipt of the qualification allowance there. So in terms of the allowances, you can only receive one allowance at a time, either the location allowance or the specialist qualification allowance. If it was the case where you'd be eligible for both, you would receive the higher of the two, so it'd be the specialist qualification allowance. In terms of annual leave entitlements, so if you're starting off now, as a staff nurse and midwife, you're going to be entitled to 24 days annual leave per year. That if you're a 5/5 worker, so it's someone who works just Monday to Friday, they're not rostered for weekends at all, that's your annual leave entitlement for the year. It is higher than the minimum entitlements passed by legislation, which is 20 days. So you would receive your 24 days annual leave, and your public holidays, you would take them as they fall. So if the public holiday falls on a day where you're normally rostered to work, you'd receive a paid day off work. If a public holiday falls on a day where you're not normally rostered to work, then you would receive a fifth of your weekly pay. If it's a case where you're going to be working on a ward and you're going to be working a 5/7 roster, so it's you could be rostered at any time between Monday to Sunday, then you receive your 24 days annual leave, and your 10 days public holidays are then added on top of that in order to give you the 34 days annual leave, because there's no guarantee that you'd be getting them throughout the year. So I suppose, again, there's an awful lot of information on there. I don't want to go into information overload for you, but just those are some of the things that are on the website. If you do have any questions on them, please don't be afraid to get in touch. I suppose in terms of other more reputable, websites to go to rather than just relying on Google, there is the INMO website, obviously, there's the HSE website, the Department of Social Protection. If you're wondering about anything like maternity benefits or, injury, illness benefit, the amounts for what's provided by the state is on that website. There's the NMBI website, the Health and Safety Authority, and again, the Work Relations website. So again, these are our opening hours. I'm just going to leave the contact details there for a minute if anyone wants to take a screenshot of those. They are freely available on the INMO website, or if you just ring through to reception and ask to be put through to the information office, you'll get through to us, no problem. So I think we're just coming up to time there. So I suppose thank you very much for your attention to this presentation. I hope you found it useful, and congratulations again on reaching the end of your course. Best of luck with the start of your careers.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was absolutely brilliant. So if anyone is looking for Catherine's details at the end, just let me know and I can get them to you. So next, now we're going to move on to myself. I'm going to speak on the topic of how the INMO is structured and how new graduates can expect to progress up the salary scales, and just different information in relation to new graduates. So one second, I'll just pop up this presentation. Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to make this a little smaller. So as I said, my name is Roisin O'Connell. I am the Student and New Graduate Officer with the INMO, and I'm going to talk about using the INMO as a new graduate. So firstly, to start off, the INMO is the only professional trade union exclusively for nurses and midwives, ran by nurses and midwives. As you can see, a lot of our staff are or have been nurses and midwives in their previous life. So we have a unique perspective on what it's like to be a nurse or midwife. We have over 40,000 members across the country. We are also affiliated to ICTU, the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. I myself am on the International Council of Nurses Student Steering Group as the European representative. And then I suppose just another key point, a lot of people tend to mix us up with NIMBY or the NMBI, which are the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland. They are your regulator. They protect the public from you. They set out different guidelines, scopes of practice, all those kind of things that we are to abide by and follow. But we are your trade union, so we act on your behalf. We represent you, we give you advice and things like that. So I suppose the main key elements that we do, we focus mainly on rights and entitlements and interests. So that would be where the likes of Catherine and her colleague Catherine gave out an awful lot of information to our members in relation to contracts, law, policies and agreements. They give out regular information in relation to your entitlements in the likes of, like they said, annual leave, maternity leave, all those kind of things that we don't necessarily need to know about all the time, but at different parts of our lives, it's nice to be able to get that information. Our second main focus then will be issues in the workplace, such as dignity at work policies, grievance and disciplinary procedures. And then follow on from that would be fitness to practice, indemnity, legal advice, and representation. Up until now, as you were students, you would never have gone to fitness to practice. There would never be an issue in relation to your PIN because you hadn't gotten one yet. And if there was an issue, it would be sorted through your CPCs and your managers and things like that. But it does change as you get your PIN. If there was an issue in the workplace, it would have to be investigated. And depending on the situation, it may have to go to fitness to practice. Now, there's no need to be scared or frightened because I know when a lot of people hear that, they really start to panic. There are so many people who go throughout their nursing career and never have an issue at work. You know, they never have an issue, they never need to call for assistance, but it's just being there in case you need someone. A lot of the time it's figuring out what your rights are in relation to your pay, what salary scale you should be on, because sometimes it can be really difficult to find that information if you don't know where to look. And that's what our day-to-day job is giving out that kind of information, making sure that our members know what they're entitled to and that they are getting those entitlements. So how the INMO works, we are a democracy, we are led by our members, which are you. Everything that we do is voted on by our members. We have local representatives in the workplace, so such as our INMO reps, we would have student reps that I'm sure some of you may know. We also then have our other local representatives, such as just our INMO reps, which are qualified nurses or midwives that work within the HSE that voluntarily are a rep with us. We don't pay them, they don't get any kind of monetary thing for that, but they're involved, they help give out information in the workplace, and they can be a great source of information if you ever just wanted to seek some advice but didn't necessarily want to call in or to call the union. We also then have our industrial relations officers and executives. And a key thing to remember is a lot of people think that they are part of your workplace management and that if there is an issue that your manager will be aware of it. That is not the case. We are completely independent of your workplace, and this also goes for our industrial relations officers and executives. We are completely separate to your workplace. If you ring us looking for information about something, we do not escalate it unless you want to. The control is always with you. If you do not want to go any further, you just want to seek advice, then that is no problem. We will just do that. We also focus then on referrals to third parties such as the WRC or the Labour Court, appeals to the High Court on points of law, and then also industrial action does tend to be our last resort, such as protests, strikes, which I'm sure a lot of the time when people think of a union, the first thing they think of is strike, but it is something that we do try to avoid, but unfortunately sometimes it does have to take place. So I suppose one of the key things that we focus on as well is representing individuals. We do tend to also represent collective groups, which I will talk about in a moment, but a lot of our issues do tend to be individual issues. So this is just an example of a nurse who management sought to remove from clinical practice and to end their contract because they were making multiple drug errors. It was found that that nurse had undisclosed diagnosis of dyslexia, and that upon intervention from the INMO and representation, appropriate supports were put in place and that nurse was allowed to remain in practice. Now that is obviously a very unique situation, but there are incidences that will only affect you. They may not affect other people on your ward. Like for example, you may not be getting the correct pay. It may not be affecting anyone else, just you, but we do represent on those issues as well. So you don't have to suffer in silence. Come to us if you have an issue. We will try our best to alleviate it, to fix it, to give you advice. Again, as I said, we also represent on collective issues. So this is just another example of where new graduates in one hospital were not allowed to use the staff car park, as it was said that there was not enough spaces. As you are staff members, you cannot be treated any less favourably than other staff members. And the INMO argued on those new graduates' behalf. And within a few days, they were able to use the staff car park. Now, again, a very unique situation, but if you weren't able to park at work and you were having to park somewhere else just because you were a new graduate, that's not fair. And it is something, again, that, you know, we would try our best to to correct or offer representation on, if there is something affecting a group as a whole, to come to us and we will try our best. A lot of people assume that because these things are obvious and they're talked about, that we know, but unless someone comes to us and explains what's happening, we can't pursue it. And that's the key thing people forget, is that you have to come to us with the problem for us to be able to represent or offer advice or try and fix it. So I suppose the next thing then is pay. So this was just another example of where new graduates in one hospital remained on the pre-reg rate of pay for months after they received their PIN. So I suppose it is something that you're going to have to keep an eye out as you progress up the salary scales. Again, I'm going to talk about that now in just a moment, but it is important that you are the only one receiving your pay slip. So you're the only one that's going to know if you're not getting paid the correct amount of money. So they were not receiving recognition of their internship for their incremental credit, which is something that the INMO pushed to have recognized years ago. So it's now recognized as part of your incremental credit. So it goes towards 9 months of a year. So once you have 3 months, you can then move up onto your next increment. Previous to this, it wasn't recognized. So students started off at a much lower rate of pay. Again, then the INMO made representations, and some members received up to €1,500 in retrospective pay. So, it's really important that over time, if you're not being paid the correct amount of money, it can add up to quite a large sum of money, and that if you're entitled to pay, that you should be receiving the correct amount of pay. So moving on then, as I was saying, I'm just going to talk briefly about pay, because it is something that once you qualify, it changes quite rapidly over the coming months. So we're just going to talk very briefly about it. So when you are on your internship, you are on the salary point of €15,403, and you're on that for the 9 months. Once you finish your 9-month internship, you then go on to the pre-reg rate of pay, which you can see here in the second column is €26,679. You are on that until you get your NIMBY PIN. Thankfully, over the last few years, NIMBY have become quite more efficient with giving out pins, and they do tend to come a lot quicker than they used to. So you tend to only be on that rate of pay for a week or two, maybe 3. Once you have received your PIN, you will then go to the first point of the nursing scale, which is €31,109. You will be on that scale approximately from when you qualify 16 weeks. So that also includes your pre-reg rate. Once you've been qualified, roughly 16 weeks. So if you qualify in September, if you add on 16 weeks, it roughly brings you to February. In February, you should skip the second point of the salary scale and go directly to the third point of the salary scale, which is €33,888. This is something that we fought for in our previous strike in 2019, which was approved. And as you can see in the last column, you can see how over the years, how it dramatically increases the amount of money you make over the next 10 years. So it was quite a substantial win for us. And it's major for student nurses, because it just means that you go up the salary scale so much quicker and at a much greater rate of pay. Once you're qualified a year from then, you go to the fourth point of the salary scale. But at this time, you are now eligible to go on to our new enhanced nurse contract. So the enhanced nurse contract was brought in again in 2019 after the strike, when we striked to try and keep our new graduate nurses from traveling abroad, and to try and entice them to stay with us or to come back from their respective countries that they may have traveled to. Once you've reached the fourth point of the once you've reached the fourth point of the nurses scale, you are eligible to apply for the enhanced nurse contract. There was a lot of speculation around the enhanced nurse contract when it was initially brought in, and a lot of people felt that there was major differences between that contract and the original nursing contract. But I can confirm that there is no difference other than you are agreeing to participate in continuous professional development. Now, I know when you say that, a lot of people get quite nervous again. What does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to have to do loads of courses? What does that entail? A lot of countries across the world already have this implemented, so it's not something new. It just means that you're going to monitor the courses that you do. Over the course of your career, you are going to do so many courses anyway. It just means that now you are going to keep track of those courses and be more vigilant maybe about where your certs end up. But other than that, the only difference with that contract and your previous contract is how your salary progresses over the coming years. There's a much better salary with the enhanced nurse contract. To get the enhanced nurse contract, as I said, you have to have made it to the 4th point of the nursing scale, and you have to then apply for it. When you reach that time, if you are unsure how to apply, again, you can contact our information office and they will give you advice on how to apply. Around that time, if you are a member of the INMO and you are receiving the WIN magazines, we do highlight that this is the time that you can apply, because it is really important that you start to that you move on to the enhanced nurse contract, because it has greater benefits for you over the coming years. Again, the main incentive being that the money is so much better. Again, then for those of you who are working in a specific environment, as Catherine spoke about earlier, you may be eligible for a location allowance of €2,374. And as Catherine said, those areas have been greatly extended. So now if you work on a medical ward or a surgical ward, you will also receive the location allowance there. You will also be eligible for the dual qualification allowance if you go on and do further studies, but at the moment that doesn't apply to you just because you're only just finishing your first degree. I'm sure thinking about going back to college is a no right now. So I'm just going to move swiftly on then. A second now. Perfect. So again, the main thing to remember is to keep an eye on your pay slips. If you know that your pay hasn't changed in about 16 weeks after you qualify, to contact your payroll or salaries department. What I've been suggesting people to do is that they put a little alarm in their phone for the first week of February, just reminding them should move to 3rd point of salary scale. If by the end of February you haven't moved to the 3rd point of the salary scale, I would suggest that you first contact payroll and your salaries department. And if you get nowhere, to come to me and we will try our best to get you onto the correct salary scale. Again, it is something that you're entitled to. So if it does take a new number of weeks, you should be back paid for the amount of weeks that you were paid incorrectly. Then I suppose our next point then, just to remember that your free INMO student membership expires once you qualify. So once you finish your internship in September, you will no longer be a student member with the INMO and you will have to join on as a full member. So I'm just going to talk briefly about that now. So there are other benefits to being a member of the INMO. It's not all just striking and banging on tables and fitness to practice. We also have our professional development centre, which hosts different courses similar to this. We also have our library service, which is one of Ireland's most comprehensive dedicated nursing and midwifery libraries. And it can provide you with specialist information regarding different topics that you may be investigating or whatnot. It also highlights the different conferences that are going to be held in Ireland and around the world in relation to nursing and midwifery. And again, then it offers a really wide range of courses in relation to your own professional development. This is something that as the enhanced nurse contract grows, you are going to be participating in more courses, and that may be an avenue for you to do extra courses. We also then have our WIN magazine, which is the Worlds of Irish Nursing and Midwifery. If you are a full member of the INMO, you will receive a hard copy of this. I think it's 10 copies a year, and you can opt to get that as a virtual copy if you wish, but sometimes it is kind of nice to get the magazine. So the magazine has different pieces in that relating to articles from around the world in relation to nursing. It also has updates on what's going on around Ireland in relation to nursing. And again, then there is a section from myself every month just in relation to students. It can be quite helpful as well if you're looking for a job around the country. There is a lot of jobs advertised in the back section as well. So if you're ever looking for something, it's a great place to start. Again, then we also have our core market rewards. So I'm not going to talk about that right now just because core market are coming on actually after me. So I'm going to leave that to them because they are the experts. But it's just to be aware that we are affiliated with them. So again, then joining full membership it is €299 for the year. There is two options to pay, one through deduction at source, which is through your payslip, or the other through a bank transfer. Deduction at source is the most common payment method. It would have been the one that I used when I was a nurse. And it just means that when you get paid, you've already paid that bill. You don't need to worry about it. If you are paid every 2 weeks or fortnightly, the cost is $11.50. Or if you're paid every month, it works out at $24.92 per calendar month. So it can be quite affordable when it's spread out. It is important to remember that it's very similar to car insurance. You know, you can't come to us if you have an issue and you're not a member and then join. You have to be a member at the time the event takes place, or we can't offer you advice. So it's very similar. If you crash, you can't go and join Aviva or join Corn Market looking for insurance when you've already had the accident. So it's just something to be aware of as well. This is our online application form. So if you're looking for this, just go on to our INMO website and it's on the student page, and you just fill this out and just send it to me or to the membership department, and we will process your membership. Similarly, then we also have our actual physical membership forms. Some of you I may have met already in different sessions throughout the country, or you may have submitted a form already. If you have, then that's no problem. If you haven't, it is important to remember that your student membership will be finishing, and that if you have an issue, it is likely that within your first 6 months of qualifying is when you're most likely to have an issue, or when you're most likely to need representation or advice, just because it's the first time you've been left on your own, you've had a caseload on your own, and it can be quite daunting for people. So it is important to be a member of a union. And thank you very much, guys. That's my presentation. I'm just going to leave up my information for a minute. If any of you want to email me, again, I can forward these slides to anyone who wants them. But that's my email there, roisin.o'connell@inmo.ie. So I'm just going to pop out now, because next we are going to have Alison Brereton from Corn Market. I know that she has joined. So Alison is going to talk about all the benefits of joining full membership, including the access to Corn Market Rewards scheme. So Alison, are you okay to share your screen?
Hi, Roisin. I am here.
You're great.
I'm just, going to see if I can share my screen now. Can you see?
I can see your screen, but it's just me.
Okay. Can you see my presentation now?
1 second now. I think it's loading. I can't. I can just see a white screen at the moment.
Oh, okay. Let me see. It might take a sec. I'm not as interior as
Listen,
with Zoom.
don't worry about it. If you go into the share screen and then it gives you a few options, you have to pick the presentation itself. I know it can be quite difficult. A few times it has happened to me, so don't worry.
I can actually see the presentation now. I couldn't see that earlier, so
there you go. Yeah, that's perfect. We can see.
Great. So can you see INMO New Graduate presentation?
Yeah, I can see it all.
And just before I start, I'll just test and see if I change screen. Can you see that?
I can see, yeah, it's moving. Perfect.
Perfect. That's great. Thanks so much, Roisin. You can shout at me if I lose the presentation or it falls off or anything.
Perfect. I'll let you know if anything happens.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all enjoying the great weather that we've been getting. It's so lovely to get it, especially before you start out, I suppose, full time in your career now. So it's great to be able to do something nice with the good weather. As Roisin mentioned during her presentation there, we are affiliated with the INMO. We work in partnership with them to make sure that when it comes to your finances, you have a go-to, I suppose, person, and that you know where you should be going for advice. So that's why I'm here to talk to you today. My name is Alison Brereton and I work in the life and pension section in Corn Market. So today is really just an introduction. You'll probably see in the hospital over your career, you'll probably hear people talking about us and things like that. So it's good for you to know exactly who we are and what we can do for you, particularly as new members to the INMO, and as Roisin mentioned there, through opting for INMO rewards. Okay. So there's currently almost 25,000 INMO members that have financial products with Corn Market. So they're anything from, car insurance, home insurance, health insurance, right up to income protection, life cover, then say savings, pensions, things like that. Okay, so we would consider ourselves the go-to person for public sector finances, and I work very, very closely with nurses and health workers, when it comes to these products. So Corn Market, we have been celebrated actually our 50th birthday this year. So we have a really long-standing relationship with you guys. So you will meet us from the very start to the very end of your career and all times in between. And your financial needs will change as you go on through your career. But I suppose today we're just going to focus on the areas that you should be looking at when you start out, and as I said, what we can offer you through rewards. So by opting into the reward scheme on your INMO membership form there, that gives you the option of having a host of discounts and things through Corn Market. So once you click on rewards, your details will be passed to us, and we will contact you to see if you would like to sit down with us for a short financial review to review your pay slip and things like that. And I'll talk to you about that a little bit now in a sec. But I would encourage you all to take that appointment. It is free. You can do it through Microsoft Teams, similar to what we're doing now, and it's really, really beneficial when you start out in your career. With INMO rewards, provided you opt to join income protection within the first couple of weeks, you can get that free for 9 months. So that offers you free protection on your salary for the first 9 months of your career, which is excellent. If you want to opt out of it after that, you can, but it is something that we would encourage you to be in for your whole career, and I'll explain why now in a sec. You can also get €75 off health insurance, and then €80 off car insurance. So I suppose that's a really important one when you're starting out, because most of you probably have a car, and if not, you're probably thinking about getting one for work now. So you do have that discount there. And then for any of you that are homeowners at the moment, there's a discount on that as well. And as I said, then we offer you a free sit down with us, and if any of you are looking at life insurance or anything like that, we can review that for you. But the main thing I would say that you should be sitting down with us at the start is to look at these areas that you can avail of, and to make sure, kind of like what Roisin was going through there a few minutes ago, that you're being paid correctly and that you understand your pay slip. So the first thing when we meet with you, the first thing we look at the money that you have coming in. So we're going to look at your salary now as you start out in September, October, and make sure that that's correct, and look at what you're now going to be using that money for. So when it comes to your finances, you have needs and you have goals. So a need is like if you have car insurance or a car, you need to have it insured. If you have an income, you need to have it insured. So they're things that you need to have. But then a lot of you will have goals. So you may have different goals, like maybe at the start, just to make sure that you're paid correctly and that you understand how to claim, tax back and stuff like that. Your goal might be to get a mortgage, or maybe to save for a holiday. And some of you, your goal may be, your pension and your long-term planning, and make sure that you were financially fit for your whole life. And when we look at these things, then we put a plan in place to make sure that as you are today and as your life situation is today, that you're financially fit for that. And as that changes, then we review it throughout the years. But in Corn Market, we know that being financially fit for life is a huge part of your overall well-being, because as you go through your career, you don't want to be worrying about money and making sure that you've got all your different areas protected. That's our job. So you need to let us look at that for you and to guide you throughout your career. When we sit down with you now, maybe in say like October, November, as you start out, and the first thing that we will do is look at your pay slip. So we look at the first pay slip that you have, and we'll make sure that you understand that. So when you get your first pay slip, and a lot of you will have been paid from the hospitals over the last number of months, you'll know that there's an awful lot of deductions there, and there's an awful lot of figures on it and words. And it's really important that you understand, what they are, why they're there, what they're doing for you, and also to make sure that they're correct, that there's nothing there that shouldn't be there, or there's nothing missing. And also, as Roisin was going through your pay scales and your enhanced pay scales, to make sure that you're on the right one and that you're starting it correctly, and that you know what you should be going up to in 16 weeks and then again a year later. So we'll make sure that we explain all of that to you. Also, it's really important when you start out in your career that you understand your tax credits and your cut-off points. So a lot of you will have been working in the hospital, and you may also have maybe part-time jobs and things like that. So your tax credits might be bouncing around from different pay slips. And some of you may have, overpaid tax on certain pay slips. Some of you may have even underpaid tax. So it's really important that when you start out now in September, October, that your tax credits are allocated correctly. and that, you know, at the end of the year, you know how that you can claim back any tax that you might be due if you've overpaid. Okay, and we do find that a lot when people start out. Also, as nurses, you are entitled to an additional tax credit, and we'll show you what that is and how you can claim that. So I would say the most important meeting that you will have at the start of your career is this one, making sure that you understand your payslip and that you're being paid correctly. So that's very important. The next thing then that we go through with you is understanding your sick leave. So this is really important. Obviously, you're just starting out in your career and you're probably thinking, look, why do I have to worry about sick leave? I'll never get sick. But, you know, people do get sick, and it's really important that if you do find yourself, you know, injured or taking sick, that you understand when your sick leave will stop from your employer and then it will reduce and things like that. So when we meet with you, we'll explain that in greater detail. But I suppose the basics of it when you start out are that if you end up getting injured and say you're out of work for, we'll just take an example of 7 months. The first 3 months of that, you will receive full pay from your employer. The next 3 months, you'll receive half pay from your employer. And then after that, you're looking at trying to claim maybe social welfare if you're entitled to that now from previous jobs, or down the line, you might be entitled to claim something small from your pension. But some of you may not be yet entitled to claim anything there. So you could find yourself off the payroll or on very late after 6 months. So it's important that you understand that that's there. And there's lots of different rules with it. And again, we can explain that on a one-to-one basis. But it is important when you start out to understand that when you start out, you'll probably find that you're doing, you know, overtime, maybe Saturday and Sundays, you might have different allowances. But if you find yourself on sick pay, that full pay element is just full of your basic pay. So it doesn't cover, you know, the overtime and things like that that you're doing. And so you may find yourself down pay initially when you are off sick. So we will explain this in the appointment, I suppose, how it works and how it can affect you in real life terms. But the really important thing to know when you start your career is that you have an option there to protect your salary. And that's where the INMO income protection scheme comes in. And this is a brilliant scheme. It's fantastic. It comes with a host of extra benefits, and it's only for INMO members. So when it comes to protecting your salary in general, there are 2 options. You have your union endorsed plan, so your INMO plan, or you have a private off-the-shelf income protection scheme that anybody can apply to join. If you are in the INMO and you can get into that INMO income protection plan, that's the one you should be in, because there's huge protection on it in terms of with Corn Market and the INMO backing you on it. And also it comes with a host of additional benefits that we'll explain on a one-to-one basis. But that's one thing I suppose that the INMO and Corn Market fight for on your behalf is great terms and conditions and great benefits of that scheme. And then, as I said at the start, if you join INMO Rewards, you get that free for the first 9 months. So it's a great opportunity to get into the scheme when you're young, fit and healthy, and then have that protection in place. And basically, once you're in that scheme, you're looking at being protected up to 75% of your salary. And that's the max that you can get protection for in Ireland. But the key thing to note, as I said earlier, your normal sick leave doesn't cover overtime, etc. But the INMO income protection scheme does cover any overtime that you did the previous year. So that will be worked to the 75%. So if you find yourself on half pay from your employer, you'll get an additional 25% of your salary from income protection subject to claim. And then after that, you're looking at up to 75% of your salary minus anything else that you are due. So I suppose when you're starting out in your career, the 2 things that I really encourage you to do are check your payslip, make sure that your tax credits and all of that are correct, and then make sure that you understand your sick leave and that you have yourself fully protected if anything should happen. So moving on from that now, I'm going to mention pensions. I know you're only starting out in your career, so I'm not going to terrify you completely in talking about your pension. But we conducted a survey during COVID in 2020. And in that survey, we saw that 82% of people surveyed said that having enough money in their pension was one of their biggest financial worries. So we know that you guys are worried about this in your career, and that's why it is important that we're there for you and that we can explain how your pension works and how you can plan to retire at an age that you want to, as opposed to an age that you're being told you have to go to. 90% of people surveyed said that the thought planning for their finances in retirement should start in their early 20s and 30s. That's really good, because it means that there is now an awareness out there that your employer pension isn't going to be good enough, and it isn't going to be sufficient to allow you to retire, so that you should be retiring and planning for that at a young age. And I suppose in the initial meeting with us, we'll just show you what scheme you're on, what your normal retirement age is, and what the options are when it comes to saving for your retirement. The big thing to know when you start out is that there are 4 different pension schemes in the public sector. 3 main ones, because a lot of people in the first one are currently retired. But for you guys, when you're starting out on wards and things like that, and you're talking to your colleagues, your new colleagues, they may be talking about a pension scheme that actually isn't relevant to you because they may have started at in a different year. So if you were talking to someone who say is coming up to retirement now, and they might say to you, oh, you can retire at 60 and you'll get half of your final salary in a pension if you full service. That's the old pension scheme and that's gone now. So you guys are starting on the new single pension scheme. And your normal retirement age is in line with the current old age pension. So that's how long you're expected to work to. But there are options there to allow you to retire earlier. I suppose the big thing for you to just be aware of is that you're on the new single pension scheme. It's different to anybody that started over 2013. So when it comes to your pension now, you need to be seeking advice from ourselves as opposed to talking to a colleague on the ward, because they could be on a completely different scheme to yourself. And the difference, I suppose, in the pensions are now that they are significantly lower. You may receive the state pension if that's there when you retire, but you may have to wait a significant number of years until you get it. So when you retire, there is a huge income drop there. Now, there are different options when it comes to saving into your pension, and I'm mentioning them today because you'll hear of them when you're on the wards. You'll hear people talking about AVCs, which are additional voluntary contributions to your pension. You'll hear them talking about buying back years. And for you guys, purchase schemes are available with your employer to allow you to purchase more pension each year with a single pension scheme. And I suppose, as I said, not to scare you with your pension or anything at the start, but just to know that we are here if you are confused about any of these terms. If you receive your pension statement and you're confused about it, you can come to us and we'll explain exactly what it means and exactly what option is right for you. And if you do choose to do any sort of additional savings into your pension over the next couple of years, there is a big tax incentive there to do that, and we can show you how that works and make sure that if you are contributing additionally into your pension, that you're getting any tax back that you're due. Okay, so that's, I suppose, the main thing when it comes to your pension is making sure that you know which one you're on, what your own rules are, and what these different terms are that are going to be, I suppose, thrown at you over the next couple of months. We can also help you save, look at your saving goals. So if there's any of you there that are saving, that's brilliant. We'll see if there's any way you can get a better return for your money. And if you're not saving, kind of back to the financially fit for life at the start, we look at the money that you have coming in now and, you know, maybe how much you can afford to save going forward and see if we can get you saving. Okay, so they're the main areas that we will look at when we meet with you. When it comes to your financial well-being, then all of this ties into that, you know, making sure that you understand your finances, that you understand how to protect yourself now from the start of your career to the middle to the end, and that you're putting a plan in place from the start to make sure that that's all lining up correctly. So as I said, when you join the INMO rewards, we will contact you to see if you want to have a sit down, but Roisin has my details. So for any of you that kind of want to get the ball rolling and want to look at it, even before that, I can organise that for you. And as I said, we can do it through Teams. Just before lunch, we're going to talk about, you know, mental health and different ways in which you can help yourself going forward in your career. But just, I suppose, before I come back for the afternoon session, because I'll be playing a video at that point, I just want to, I suppose, mention mental health and show you some of the initiatives that Core Market have run and are running for nurses, so that you can be aware that there are different initiatives out there. So as we know, life as we knew it changed during COVID-19, and people became very vulnerable, and it was a very uncertain time. I know a lot of you would have been, you know, working in the hospital and really seeing this at the very start of your career and your studies. And COVID really affected, you know, physical and mental health, our way of life, and also our finances. So there are different initiatives that we ran last year, and again, I'll talk to you a bit more about that before lunch.
Sorry now,
But just to
Alison, I
mention,
don't mean
some
to.
of you will hear of Pink and Blue Power when you're out in the workplace, and that's an initiative that Core Market ran with the INMO over the last couple of years, and will be running again into, we hope, 2023. There's also MyDoc that we run that gives you access to MyDoc if you're an INMO income protection member, and we also ran the Let's Talk About It campaign over the last 2 years, which I'll speak about later. The INMO, the Pink and Blue Power scheme was a breast and prostate health assessment and education program. And it's basically where we invited you to take part in GP assessments with these two areas. In previous bookings, 5,000 INMO members booked in for an appointment. There was 872 of those referred for further tests. And actually 7 nurses were diagnosed with breast cancer through the scheme. So if you're in the INMO income protection scheme, this is something that you will be able to avail of in 2023, 2024 when we run it again. Okay, so it is an initiative there that is part of the INMO income protection benefits. Also, with the INMO income protection, you get access to MyDoc for you and your family. So this is where you have MyDoc on your phone as an app, and you can use it for as many GP appointments as you need throughout the year. So most of us will go to the GP a couple of times during the year. That might cost you 50, 60 euro. But if you do it through MyDoc, it's free, and it's free, as I said, for INMO income protection members, and it is unlimited access. You can basically use it for anything that you don't need to be physically examined for. You can also get prescriptions and repeat prescriptions through MyDoc, and you can get 6 certs as well through MyDoc. So it is something to be aware of that's there. And again, we'll talk about it in more detail when we're in your one-to-one meetings. Then later on, we're going to talk about the Let's Talk About It campaign that we ran. This was a fantastic campaign that we ran over the last 2 years, and it was all about nurses' mental health and well-being. And there's still a lot of resources available to you. You can access them through our website. So I want to mention it now just to let you know that I will be back at 12:45, I think it is, to speak about that in more detail. So that session will be more around mental health and well-being, and it will show you how and where you can access the additional resources that we have there. Okay, so I hope you all saw the slides and heard all of that with no issues. I'm going to stop sharing now.
That's perfect. Thanks, Alison. Can you hear me okay? We might move to Elizabeth now, just because we've gone quite a bit over time now. So we'll move to That's okay. That's okay. So I'm just going to introduce Elizabeth. So this is Elizabeth Adams. So she is the president of the European Federation of Nurses Associations, which represents 3 million nurses across Europe. So we're very lucky to have Elizabeth today. She has been involved in many different areas of nursing and has even in one of her previous posts, she was the Director of Professional Development within the INMO. So we're very lucky to have you. Sorry now, it's gone a little bit later than I anticipated, but take it away there, Elizabeth. Thank you. We can see your presentation as well. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Roisin, for the beautiful invitation and opportunity to speak to all the new graduates. And first of all, I really want to thank the President, Karen McGowan. We have a wonderful President of the INMO, and her great leadership is so appreciated. Also, as well, you have a great team within the INMO who have been representing you over the number of years under the great leadership of Philny Hay as General Secretary, and of course, of Dr. Edward Matthews as Deputy General Secretary. So first of all, as Karen eloquently said this morning, sincere congratulations to you all to get to this stage. It's an amazing achievement, and you have a fabulous opportunity ahead of you in relation to going forward. And I'm just briefly going to go through. The Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation is an amazing organisation, and it's a window of opportunity for you all to everything that's available. There's 3 things that are really important in relation to is your registration. You've worked so hard for it. And also yourself, you're really important to not only your families and yourselves to make sure you're well and healthy and all of that, but also to your patients going forward. So the people that can really protect not only your registration and yourself and support you is the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation. And no matter what it said, and I'm a long time in nursing, so I'm very jealous that you're starting your career again. I'd love to be starting again, but things will always change. And this slide is just showing there's enormous changes going on. So it's always going to be happening around you. There's always going to be political issues that are going to be impacting on your career going forward. And these will all happen around you. And the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation are incredible representations for that. Society will continue to change along the way. And, you know, your patients and their family members will expect higher standards of care, And also as well in relation to professionalism, scopes of practice are really tightly bound in relation to regulation and licensing going forward. So there's a lot of things that are going on in the background in relation to your career, but the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation certainly looks after a lot of that in relation to protecting you going forward. And I just want to give you a brief background in relation to the European Federation of Nurses, of which the INMO have been a member since the 70s. And I'm in the privileged position to be president. And the only reason I'm in this privileged position is because the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation are members, and I am a member of the INMO. And in the position, as Roisin said, I represent 3 million nurses. We have been established 50 years. We're the independent voice of nursing. And the mission is to strengthen the status and practice of the profession going forward. And we have a number of key priorities, and they mirror in some ways some of the key priorities of you nationally in the country, what the INMO are driving for at a national level. We're representing some of those issues across Europe at a European level. And we too have a governing body similar to the INMO going forward. Under our remit, just to let you know, so its only resource is the European Nursing Research Foundation, and that really is the research arm of the European Federation of Nurses. And really across Europe, you have a world of opportunity. You can work anywhere in the world with your excellent education and registration that you have. And the one thing that I would say is first consolidate your experience. And many people will want to stay in Ireland, and some people will want to get broader experience, but there's a whole world across your lifetime of your career that you can available. Across Europe, of course, there's 21 million professionals that are active in hospitals, where the health is the largest sector in Europe, employing about 10% of the population. 7.3 million nurses in the WHO European region, and 57% of them are health workers. 89% of nurses in the WHO region are female, but only 25% of leadership positions are held by women. So we still have a lot of work to do, but the INO has been instrumental in relation to driving changes for us. And just to say, in relation to health, competence for healthcare actually lies with national governments, not the European institutions as set down in the treaty. So you're saying, why are we in Europe? Because there's a lot of other policies and legislation broader than health that impacts on health and impacts on national governments, and decisions across Europe often influence our own government in Ireland. So it's really important that we're representing you there too. So, and some examples of that, when the COVID vaccine, the European Union for the first time into the healthcare and leading on healthcare. And I think we're going to see that more and more. They're heavily invested as well in relation to emergency preparedness now going forward. And in relation to, there's a load of information and documents out there, but if you're ever looking for resources that influence Europe and then influence our own country, the OECD on an annual basis have Health at a Glance, and it looks across all the European countries. And as you can see there, it looks from things like climate change, including air pollution, and you can see the very high numbers that are affected by that. It monitors trends. So you can see, for example, the 700 deaths in relation to smoking, and it looks at health spending, effectiveness, and resilience of systems, which were proven to be very poor during the pandemic. And the report calls for more protection and prevention of the 1.2 million people who die prematurely every single year. 64% of those are actual preventable deaths. And just to say, there are huge challenges that are recognised across Europe, and the shortage of healthcare workers, and particularly of qualified nurses and midwives of the quality that you are, is really, so the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation and the European Federation of Nurses are continually working and driving for change in relation to that. So you're a very valuable commodity. And just to say, to give you one example of the big policies across Europe, you may want to look at another point in time, is the European Pillar of Social Rights. And we line all our work up in relation to the big policy in Europe that the European Union is following. And while there's 20 principles, we look at 4 principles such as education, wages, healthcare, and long-term care. And of course, it looks at equal opportunities, which is in line with the INMO, fair working conditions, and social protection and inclusion. And you have all been through the and guided by your education by the European Directive, which we, in a short way, we call Directive 55. So all countries across Europe have to come up to the standard of Directive 55. And this is to support that you will be able to work in any European country, and your qualification is as valuable as everyone else across Europe. So it sets a playing field. But what's coming up and was talked about earlier on, and particularly when Roisin mentioned in relation to CPD, it's a very important piece that all member states are looking at, and they're all at different stages of continuous professional development and maintaining your competence for registration. There was a big study done on lifelong learning and CPD in 2014 in relation to CPD. And as you can see there, it went across all grades. And you can see the statement there in relation to what CPD is going forward. And the Irish legislation that we're guiding from, and I know my colleague, Dr. Edward Matthews, who has done tremendous work over the decades in relation to the regulatory framework here in Ireland and legislation. And it's the Nurses and Midwives Act. And particularly in that, is the important piece of Part 11 in relation to maintaining your competence. Now, those schemes have not yet been developed, believe it or not, even though it was 2011, but certainly in the early stages of your career, you will be directed by the board in relation to a certain amount. But the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation are representing how that will be shaped out. And your code of practice is a very important piece in relation to fitness to practice and following. And within that, the principle under quality mostly deals with competence and your importance that you have to be competent and you have to practice safely. Now, there's so many other CPD activities. And I think Roisin said, don't worry, because everything you do every day, even if you come across a new patient or a new disease or something that you haven't experienced before, once you keep a note of it and keep a record, everything should contribute to you and your CPD portfolio. So there's many, many ways other than, and as Roisin said, you're only out of education, but other things that you can do, short courses, which the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation provide, but also many other things in relation to reading and writing, and even having discussions with your members. So in Europe, we also have, just to flag that there's a global strategic direction that guides nursing and midwifery, and they have 4 elements. They're focusing on education, jobs, leadership, and service delivery. And I've just flagged that there are 3 webinars coming up in the future, which will be free, and the INMO are partly working with the World Health Organization on this, and they will be available for everybody to attend if they so choose. And we also work with the EU commissioners as well in relation to work, and we also do projects in relation to research. And some of them, like Immunion, is in relation to vaccination, and other ones are in relation to mentorship. And you can see them all on our website and you can follow them. And as well as that, we enter partnerships in relation to particularly the electronic health record and digitalization, which is going to be really important for your careers going forward. We have many documents all on the website and you can take a look at them. And I mentioned earlier about the European Nursing Research Foundation, and we have many evidence-based research position papers that are there, and you can read one of them and they can contribute to your CPD going forward. So all available on the website. We also monitor as well other pieces of research that are happening, and one of the big ones that's happening and will be happening at the Early Starts, as you are be a registered nurse, is the Magnet for Europe stakeholder group. And you can see that the 63 European hospitals across 6 countries, and there's 67 US Magnet hospitals that are twinned with those. So they're looking at the environment and the importance that environment has in relation to keeping a positive working group and nurses and midwives. Also, the INMO had been a member of the Nursing Now campaign, and this had a nursing challenge in it. And now that was completed, and a new product called Nursing Now Challenge is available, particularly looking at young graduates and young nurses. And again, you can go on the website and there's loads of information. There's things you can engage in, there's groups you can be part of, such as the Challenges Committee and the Global Initiative going forward. So just to say, there are events coming up. Just this week, there's one in relation to mental health. And I know you'll be talking a bit about it. So I'll put down the times down there because you may be interested in the mental health of early career nurses for 12 to 1. But if you look at the website as we go forward, there'll be plenty of events. But there's also a network and mentoring event on the 7th and 8th of October. You can choose, it's only an hour session on either date, and it's free to enter, and you get to meet people from all over the world in relation to. And I just, coming to conclusion, want to say that the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation, the membership is so important. Now that you're completed as graduate, you have to now become a full member. And for less than €1 a day, you actually have a world of information. You've already seen what was presented this morning, and I know my colleague Edward and Steve will be presenting on all the other opportunities that there. I have highlighted the European Nursing Student Association, which is one of the groups that the Irish Nurses and Midwives are. And Catherine was a tremendous president who spoke earlier on. Catherine O'Connor, she did a brilliant job in relation. So you could be president of ENSA one day. You could even be in my job one day going forward. We're also members, the INMO, the International Council of Nurses, the International Confederation of Midwives, really important. 192 countries are members, and it's only the INMO which are member of these organizations, so really important. So my final point is, first of all, always maintain your registration. No matter where I've worked in the world, I've always maintained my registration and paid my yearly fee. It's the thing that actually allows you to work. So it's really important. And the only people that are going to protect you, support you throughout your career, and are really independent and really understand what you need for all sorts of elements, from industrial relations to your registration to your CPD, is the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation. And solidarity is really the most important thing. I think David earlier on had the pictures of the 2 fishes. And the single most important factor in influencing health sector policy is solidarity within the profession. And the aim is to reach agreement and, of course, then on key issues, but maintain the stance in public. And that's what the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation does for you. It takes all the worry out of it, and it does all the hard work. So I can only wish you all every success in your careers ahead. It's absolutely wonderful. Sincere congratulations, and thank you for the opportunity to present you. And I'm going to hand back to the Roisin. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much, President. That was so much information. Thank you very much. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. So we're going to move on now to our next speaker. So our next speaker is our Deputy General Secretary of the INMO, Dr. Edward Matthews, and he's going to be speaking on the topic of protecting your registration.
That's great, Roisin. Thank you very much. And thank you, Elizabeth, as well, for that very important contribution. And Roisin, well done on putting together the event today. It's wonderful to have an opportunity to speak with you all. As Roisin said, my name is Edward Matthews. I'm the Deputy General Secretary of the INMO. I'm also a registered nurse. I've worked here for approximately 20 years now. I was first an industrial official, and then I was the Director of Professional and Regulatory Services, and now I'm the Deputy General Secretary. As Roisin said, I'm going to speak to you relatively briefly, quite frankly, in relation to protecting your registration. And it's just some reflections, not to cause panic or pandemonium, but just some important things I think that have come to my mind in terms of providing representation to registered nurses and midwives over the years about how you can best protect your registration. And the first thing I think that we must be conscious of, and perhaps many people are not on a day-to-day basis, but is the issue of being a regulated profession. And the professions of nursing and midwifery are regulated, and they're publicly regulated through the prism of the fitness to practice processes of the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Ireland. And that is important. It's important because as regulated professions, we have a duty to the public, and we are to uphold that duty, and in failure to do so, can give rise to public judicial-like proceedings in respect of one's fitness to practice. And the ultimate outcome of those proceedings can be the loss of one's license. Now, while a very small fraction of registered nurses and midwives come to the attention of the NMBI each year in relation to their fitness to practice, one defining characteristic or two defining characteristics of the process are as follows. Number one often doesn't expect that one will be the subject of a complaint, and it becomes as quite a shock. And number two is the premise that you don't have to do anything wrong in order to be subject to a fitness to practice proceeding. You can have people who make spurious complaints about you. You can have people who believe they're making a valid complaint about your practice, but they are not. And then you just sometimes have situations where people think you're to blame, but you're not for a particular set of circumstances. And there has been, even though it's a small number in the aggregate, about 100% increase in the number of complaints about registered nurses and midwives in relation to their fitness to practice. And it is a very, very serious thing in one's working career. You need to have the capacity to defend yourself if you are the subject of a fitness to practice complaint, and that defence, including legal representation, the commissioning of expert witnesses, full defence at the preliminary stage where they vet complaints to see if there'll be a fitness to practice inquiry, or a full defence at a public inquiry where evidence is heard against you and that evidence is challenged. All of the expenses in relation to that are covered by your membership of the INMO. But in order to be entitled to such defence, you must be a member of the INMO both at the time of the circumstances which give rise to the complaint and at the time that the complaint is made. And that's because obviously, as members of a union, we all contribute to a fund to defend each other, and that money can only be spent to defend people who are members of the organisation when the relevant circumstances arise. And it isn't the type of defence that one has the money available to spend on at a given time, because it can cost between 5,000 and 80,000 euro to defend the proceedings. Relatively basic preliminary proceedings can easily cost between 5,000 and 10,000 euro. And even one day of a fitness to practice inquiry, you're certainly looking at a bill of no less than 10,000 euro to defend that type of a situation. As well as the money in relation to defence, we also have to be conscious of ensuring that we have people available to defend us who are familiar with the fitness to practice proceedings of the NMBI and are doing that type of work every day. And that is what INMO membership provides to members in relation to fitness to practice. So it's so important that you maintain an insurance to defend your license, because your license is your permission to practice your profession. It underpins, as Elizabeth said, everything that you do as a registered nurse or registered midwife. So setting that point aside, I just want to mention three specific things that I think you should be conscious of as you move forward in your career. The first are your notes of care, and you'll have covered this extensively on your placements and in education. There is a professional and ethical duty contained within the code and the guidance of the NMBI to ensure that there are adequate and contemporaneous notes of the care that you provide. And that is important from a patient safety point of view, it's important from a professional defence point of view, and it's also important from an individual defence point of view. And it's so important that you take the time to ensure that your notes of care are adequate. And this comes up time and time again, where people are under pressure at work, where people are short in a particular ward or a particular area, and the notes get cut short, But in reality, sometimes things happen that you never expect are going to happen, and you must come back to your notes and they're your only recollection of what you have done at a particular period of time. And if they are significantly below what one would expect, in the absence of other evidence, that becomes the record of the care that you've provided. And as the NMBI guidance says, notes of your care are a representation of your professional practice. And if they are deficient, one can be significantly held to account. So notes of care are absolutely essential. They're essential for patient safety, but they're essential for your safety as a practitioner as well. So take time to write adequate notes. And one other piece of advice in relation to your notes that I would give you is that if you feel that something is off at a particular time, rely on your intuition. As professionals, your professional intuition will be absolutely essential to you and your practice as a nurse or a midwife. And if you feel on a particular day that a particular set of circumstances are off for one reason or another, it is essential that you make better notes than you normally would make, even to ensure that you give an adequate account of what has occurred. The next point that I'd like to raise with you is the duty to raise concerns. And this can be quite uncomfortable, particularly if you're a novice starting out. But there is a duty on nurses and midwives that if there are circumstances, whether it's the result of structure, whether it's as a result of work process, physical environment, staffing levels, etc., if you detect something that poses a risk to patient safety, you have a professional ethical obligation to raise that concern. And it is appropriate to raise it with your line manager. You can do it verbally, but if you do so verbally, I would recommend that you have a written account of having done so. You can do it by email. You can fill in the notification of concern form that the INMO provides, or you can fill in the risk management forms which exist in virtually every employment around the country. The important thing, though, is if there is a set of circumstances that causes you to have a concern with regard to patient safety, that you raise that concern. And that can be uncomfortable, and managers can sometimes react poorly to that. But in reality, I have had to defend people in fitness to practice proceedings where they have not raised issues of concern, where they did hold concerns and they have been held account for that. So the path of least resistance and the path of best protection, both of patient safety and of your own registration, is to raise concerns as they arise. And the final reflection I want to share with you in terms of defending your license or defending your practice is the alert that should come into your mind if you are ever requested to make a statement or to give a written account or a verbal account of the care which you have provided. As registered professionals, we record our care in the care notes, whether they are standard forms, whether they're online, whether it's a narrative in a paper file. We contemporaneously record the care that we give. But if any set of circumstances arises where you're asked to give a further written account of your practice, either arising from a complaint made by a patient, service user, or a relative or friend, or if your employer simply themselves of their own initiative wants you to give an account of your practice, that is a serious matter. Now, you may be asked to give an account perhaps only as potentially a witness to what occurred, but I have many examples in my professional practice defending nurses and midwives where somebody has given a statement as a potential witness and they've become drawn into a set of circumstances, or somebody who is told by a manager, I just want you to write down what happened on a given night shift at a particular time. And they'll say to you, with absolute belief in what they're saying, don't worry, there's nothing to worry about. But of course, those statements that you provide at that particular time can be used by the employer. They can end up being used by the NMBI. They can be used by the Gardaí. They can be used by the coroner. You can be the subject of disciplinary matters, investigations, trust and care investigations if there's allegations of abuse or neglect, dignity at work investigations if there's allegations of inappropriate repeated conduct towards one's colleagues. So any time that you are asked to give a formal account in writing of your practice or behavior as a nurse or a midwife, it is a significant professional moment. Your employer does have a right to ask for such accounts of your practice, but you have rights as well. You always have the right to know the reason why such an account is being given. If a complaint has been made or other information has been gathered which seeks to impugn or criticize your practice or does so by default, you're entitled to see that information. you're also entitled to time, adequate time to write your account and to advice. And you should always take time. Never write a statement on demand. If I had a penny for every time I have represented somebody in a fitness to practice process, for example, where they're facing a fitness to practice inquiry, and it's 3 or 4 years after the circumstances which give rise to the inquiry, and they were going off night duty, they were asked to write an account of something and they wrote it down by hand and handed it in. And they forget to mention something, for example. And when they later seek to rely on that point at a fitness to practice inquiry, they're then cross-examined with reference to their own statement, which says nothing about that relevant set of circumstances, such as we were short-staffed or whatever else. And they will try to say, well, your first and best account of what occurred made no mention of this. Now you're making these things up, they will say, to defend yourself in the cold light of day. So anytime that you're asked to give an account of your professional practice, it is an important professional moment. Always stop and think, always take time, and always seek the advice of the INMO in relation to the document that you're going to submit. And that service is available to every member of the organisation, and it is an important service. It is a significant professional moment to commit to writing what you have done in a particular set of circumstances, and it is a moment in one's professional career that should not be undertaken lightly and should always be undertaken with advice. So I think those were the reflections, Roisin, that I wanted to share with the group. I want to wish you well in your future career. I recall fondly when I started out as a registered nurse, neither today nor yesterday, I might add, but it is an exciting professional moment. And I want to assure you, having worked in this organisation for a long time, that we endeavour every day to ensure that the best interests of nurses and midwives are represented collectively, and we also take very seriously the defence and support of individual members of the union. So we will always be there with you. You're a member of the INMO, it's an important family. We make an important contribution for nurses and midwives nationally, but we also take very seriously the support of every single nurse and midwife who's a member. So I wish you well, and I look forward to working with you into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Edward. That was very insightful. So we're now going to move on to our next speaker in the INMO, which is the Head of Education and Professional Development, Steve Pittman. So he's going to outline what professional development options are out there for those who are thinking about their future career paths.
That's great. Thank you, Roisin. I'll just put up my slides.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve.
Just take a second just to find them. Nope. Try that again. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, we can see them. Yeah, we can see them. Yeah,
that's great.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, thank you, Roisin, for inviting me to this session in terms of becoming a new graduate. It's, I think, as Edward was saying, it's, you know, my memory has to go back nearly 30 years in terms of my completion of nurse education and joining the profession. And I suppose from the get-go, what I would say is it is exciting. It is a profession that has an immense array of opportunities, both within the profession in terms of other activities in the health service as well, both nationally and internationally. So you can make it in terms of whatever you want to make it, because there are those opportunities within nursing. The other thing I would say is, which has changed dramatically in Ireland over 20 years, there's been a change in terms of the shortage of nurses. But internationally, there is a global shortage. You know, it's estimated there'll be nearly 12 million nurses short by 2030. So the starting point, I would say, is that it's just to remember that you are a valuable, precious resource. There are organisations out there in Ireland, and we want you to stay and practice within Ireland, within the health service, but also internationally. there are opportunities for you both nationally and internationally. So always remember that, have that at the forefront of your mind, that you are a precious resource that people want, and the qualification also travels as well. So what I'm going to talk about, and I only have a short period of time, I'm going to talk about your professional development and career options, and it'll be in a general sense. I won't go down to specific examples, so it'll be more in a general sense. But what I wanted just to start off and say, and this has probably come through from the presentations already, is just to highlight and just have an understanding of what the nursing and midwifery organisations are within Ireland. Is to remember there is a Department of Health, and there is a Chief Nursing Officer in the Department of Health. Their primary role is to set the strategy and policy for nursing and midwifery in the country. So they play an immensely important role in terms of the future direction, in terms of how things will unfold over the next 5, 10, 20 years, and have been pivotal since the introduction of that post in the late 1990s. So the Chief Nursing Officer. We also have the Office for the Nurse and Midwifery Service Director, which is based in the HSE. So that's the Nurse and Midwifery Office within the HSE. They oversee things such as developments in terms of education, support in role developments. And then an important role, so they're within the HSE, so they're supporting the services of delivering the health service. They don't have a reporting relationship in terms of services, but they oversee the development. So that's an important role as well. And I'll mention that later on, how it is important in terms of professional development. The bottom left-hand corner is the regulator, NMBI. So the board, their primary function, as you probably already know, is to safeguard the public. And all of those three organisations, primarily their focus is on nursing and midwifery. The difference with the INMO is that it represents nurses and midwives, and it's also a nurse and midwives organisation. So the people who make the decisions are nurses and midwives. So the president is a nurse midwife, is a nurse currently, and the executive are all nurse and midwives. So it's an organisation of nurse and midwives, which is slightly different to the, well, massively different to the other organisations. So it's worth understanding that. They also represent nurses and midwives in Ireland at an international level for both the International Council of Nursing and also the International Confederation of Midwives. So they're the voice of nurse and midwives internationally as well. So in terms of career pathways, we're very lucky in nursing in the sense that because of the importance and position of nurses in terms of healthcare and the large numbers of nurses, I think they're up to about 76,000 on the register within Ireland. So we are the largest professional group within healthcare. And as a consequence, there are loads of opportunities available in terms of career pathways. So in the general sense, there are sort of 4 career pathways that you can follow. The first one, which is the main one that people associate with the profession, which is the clinical pathway, in terms of through developing your clinical expertise in a particular or even in a generalist perspective, and then progressing on your career. And I'll make further points about that. There's management opportunities. There's a long-standing history within nurse and midwifery, going back over 100 years, more than 100 years, in terms of management role of nursing, both in terms of managing nurse and midwives, but also in terms of hospital management as well. Education has grown hugely with the introduction of the degree programme over the last 20 years or so. So there has been huge opportunities have opened up for nurses, both within nurse and midwifery, but also not to forget about transferring our skills and our knowledge in terms of supporting education for other professional groups as well. The one that is probably less talked about is the role of nurses in terms of research. So increasingly, there is a career pathway of nurses participating specifically in research. Often it's closely linked to education, but you can develop a career as a research nurse as well. And like I said, that is a growing area. And the other pathway, which I said is other, is which I suppose essentially is all of the opportunities that open up based upon your skills as a nurse and your experience, your education, how you can transfer those into other areas which are more general. For example, general management and leadership within healthcare. And there are nurses in senior positions within the health service and other services throughout the country and also throughout the world. So many nurses at some point in their career decide to take their skills and they move into a parallel profession. So just to start off in terms of the career pathway for clinical nurses, quite often we hear a lot spoken about in terms of specialists and advanced practice. But what I wanted to make clear right from the start is that the mainstay of the nursing and midwifery profession is the staff nurse and staff midwife. I think they define the profession. They're the professional group that patients and service users see the most of. They actually underpin the whole of the profession. So if you make a decision to remain a staff nurse for the whole of your career, there's nothing wrong with that. So don't feel influenced by the fact that there are other opportunities and people want to move in different directions. If you feel that you want to stay as a staff nurse or staff midwives, that is a career pathway, and it is a valuable career pathway that defines the professions. So moving on from that, there are clinical pathways that have developed since the Commission on Nursing in the late 1990s. However, interestingly, even though the clinical side of nurse and midwifery seems to be sort of essentially how people define the profession, a clear definition of the career pathway wasn't made until 2019, so only a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic. So this diagram isn't, you can't really see the detail, but it's more just as an illustration. So there is a report produced by the Chief Nursing Officer called A Policy on the Development of Graduate to Advanced Nursing Practice. In the red block in the middle, they're the registrable qualifications. So being a midwife, a children's nurse, being a general nurse, an RNID, and so on. So they're the basic in terms of entry onto the registration. So that's for credentialing purposes. And then as we move up, we can see that there's a development in terms of there's a potential of post-registration registrational courses, such as the public health nurse course, which is an additional registration, or also the clinical nurse and clinical midwife specialist. Those positions, the CNS and CMS posts, have been around for about 20-25 years. Now, interestingly, they're not a registrable qualification. They're defined by a job title you apply for. There is an expectation in the next couple of years that those posts will become part of the register, but there will be an annotation. So there won't be a full section of the register. They'll just be recorded next to your name, and it'll be likely tied to the education. So the key thing on both of those elements is there's a requirement to complete further education, a postgraduate course. For the clinical specialist post, currently that's at a level 8. It's likely in the next couple of years that will align to a level 9 course, which is at a master's degree level, but it's not necessarily requiring the full master's degree. It might be a postgraduate diploma. And the same for the public health nursing course, which are already aligned as a level 9 course. Just to say with the public health nursing course, that is a funded course. There are places on that course funded by the HSE every year. So if you're looking to move into the community, have a look around about the beginning of the year for the advertisements for the PHN program. And you'll find those in the HSE, on the HSE website of the Office of the Nurse and Midwifery Service Director. So above that, there's also been a huge development within opportunities for nurses to expand their role in terms of prescription authority, or for prescribing ionized radiation or X-rays as well. That's been around for probably about 15 years or so. To be able to prescribe, you need to have completed a course. You don't have to be a clinical nurse specialist or an advanced nurse practitioner to be able to prescribe medicines, but you do need to meet the requirements and be registered with NMBI. So that's a separate registration. And then right at the top in the blue, there's the advanced nurse and advanced midwife practitioner. That is a move in terms of the country to move towards ensuring 3% of the population of nurse and midwives are advanced practitioners. This allows people to perform at an advanced level in terms of decision making, but also in terms of their clinical skills as well. So those opportunities are growing immensely. And from the 2019 dispute, there's been further funding available for nurses in those positions. So I think we're up to about 600 positions within the HSE, and there is an expectation it will move up to about 700 positions, with also the potential of an expectation, I've heard the Minister of Health, moving up to 5%. So that would expand it even further. So there are huge opportunities in advanced practice. So what this document is important for, that in the past, it was unclear in terms of the pathway and how long the pathway would take towards advanced practice. So theoretically, from graduation, you could become an advanced practitioner in 3 to 5 years. Now, this will depend primarily on your organization supporting you. But what it shows is that there is a clearer pathway which you can achieve becoming an advanced practitioner. If you go onto the NMBI website, you'll see there are 2 pathways. One of them is to complete a designated master's degree in advanced practice, and the other pathway is where you already have a relevant master's degree and you need to complete the additional components. That's clearly mapped out on the NMBI website. So that gives you an idea in terms of the options available to you. And just the point I made at the beginning, there are a myriad of potential clinical options, even if they're not about at the moment. You might actually be in a position where you could develop those roles for yourself, because many nurses and midwives have gone out and created those roles and shown how they can contribute to patient and service user care. So in terms of the management pathway, this has been established for nearly 30 years, just less than 30 years, and was defined in terms of the Commission on Nursing. So the old matron post was replaced by the Director of Nursing, and the ward sister by the Clinical Nurse Manager. So there are posts, Clinical Nurse Manager 1, 2, and 3, based within the clinical area. So if you're in a hospital on the ward, you'll probably see a Clinical Nurse Manager 1 and 2, maybe a Clinical Nurse Manager 3 in some large areas like intensive care, or the Clinical Nurse Manager 2 might cover a number of areas. As you move up the management hierarchy, you can see there's the Assistant Director of Nursing and Director of Nursing, and then a number of posts, which I call Chief Nursing Officer. That could be in the Department of Health or in the hospital groups as well, or in the future in the regional groups. So we can see there is huge potential for you to develop a management career. And in addition, you could actually step outside of nursing at some point and actually take up roles within the health service, chief operating officers, CEOs of organizations. You know, it's not uncommon to see nurses in those roles. So as you move up, the expectation really would be that you'd have a master's degree within management or leadership. And I'll mention later on in terms of the funding that's available for those. As a clinical nurse manager 1, possibly nurse manager 2, you are required to have an education program. So if you're looking for a CNM 1 post, you need to try to complete a management course. Now, it's not very specific in the HSE what level of course that should be. So if you're looking to follow that pathway, start looking around once you've got your feet on the ground after 6 months, 12 months, and look for a course that could actually support an application for a CNM 1 post. You'll have to be a staff nurse for a number of years before applying for the CNM 2 post. So they're defined in the job descriptions, which are available online. The other pathway is the education pathway. These have expanded dramatically in terms of universities, colleges. So there are lecturer and professor and researcher posts that have been developed. You will be expected to have a PhD. So if you are looking to go into the university, expect that you need to move towards a PhD at some point in the future. And like I said, there are tens of those posts available in the various universities and college, both in the undergraduate program, but also in postgraduate courses. You can also gain employment on other courses as well, perhaps in leadership. So my own background, I was a lecturer in management and leadership for nearly 10 years in the RCSI, bringing my nursing experience into that domain. And then just not to forget, there's also centres for nurse and midwifery education, which are attached to all of the services. They're run and supported by the Office of the Nurse and Midwifery Service Director, and they employ nurse tutors. Now, the nurse tutor registration on NMBI is currently up for review. But if you're interested in teaching, that's also a great opportunity within the Centres for Nurse and Midwifery Education. I didn't mention the CPCs, but the Clinical Placement Coordinators is also a good opportunity that bridges both clinical practice and education as well. So I'm coming to the end. I've just got about two or three more slides. Just to say in terms of funding, we are lucky, particularly in the public sector, the funding is available for nurses to develop their careers. Now, it is a finite budget, and the main place to go if you're looking for funding either for a short course or for a master's degree or other program would be the Office of the Nurse and Midwifery Service Director. So they fund each year nurses on a myriad of different programs. So the Office of the Nurse and Midwifery Service Director, when you go onto their website, they will have information about how you apply for funding. And you usually apply through organizations called the Nursing and Midwifery Planning Development Unit. So they're just the local offices almost that report to the ONMSD. So if you're looking to develop and you're wondering, God, these master's degrees cost tens of thousands of euros, there is funding available to support you. So do have a look on that website. There is also funding available in the general HSE. So if you're interested in completing a management or leadership course, there are different funding streams available. And if you just type in terms of training, leadership, and management on the HSE website, you will see that there's funding available. If you're in the private sector, it will depend on the organisation. The smaller the organisation, the less likely funding is available. Large organisations might have a budget for funding. In the voluntary hospitals, Tala, St James's, Beaumont, Cork, and so on, they might also have additional revenue streams for funding. So don't feel that held back by not having access to funding. Go and seek out the funding and see what's available. The other thing just to be aware of coming down the track is the monitoring and maintenance of professional competence from the NMBI. So currently, Ireland is quite peculiar in the sense that we don't have a requirement for demonstrating competence for revalidation. It is a legal requirement under the Nurse and Midwives Act 2011, but it hasn't been introduced yet. So expect as part of your career that this will likely be developed and introduced in 2024. So you will be required to continually maintain your, which is part of the code anyway, but maintain a record of your continuing professional development. Look out for that. There'll be more information coming down the road. There's not much more information because it's still being developed. So you will be required to participate in education, training, professional development. It won't be an additional option. So one of the sources for that training, CPD, continual professional development, is services provided to the INMO. We provide cost-effective CPD for members. We also provide it for non-members, but there's an additional fee. So if you're interested in the CPD programs, go to inmoprofessional.ie. And my final slide that I just want to mention is something called job crafting. In terms of developing your career, one of the things that I've learned over the last 30 years or so is when I look at people who've developed their career, quite often they have a specific interest or focus on how their careers developed, and they look for opportunities where they can actually achieve their goal. So it might be, for example, that you are interested in becoming an advanced nurse practitioner in wound care. And you're just starting out on your career. So what you do first of all is work in an area where people require wound care, and it could be in a number of different areas would open up for you there. And when you're in the job, you're the person who steps forward to say that you're interested in wound care. You're the person that would be interested in going on committees. You're the person who'd be interested in further education. So you start positioning yourself and crafting yourself as the go-to person for wound care. And then you start looking for opportunities in terms of education, how you can teach in terms of wound care, and then position yourself in terms of a specialist post. Look for opportunities in terms of presenting at conferences or attending at conferences. Look for then the opportunity of creating an advanced nurse practitioner post. That's called job crafting. Whereas if you are just looking round and you're not quite sure, then it means that you don't have that targeted laser light like focus. Now, this might not happen until later on in your career, but it is a phenomenon and it's called job crafting, and successful people use it as an approach. So I've just gone over by a little bit. So just again, just to wish you all well in your career, and just to reiterate, nurse and midwifery are fantastic careers. I know we can see all of the negative aspects in the media due to short staffing, but they have immense opportunities for you in terms of developing your career. And I wish you well over the coming years.
Thank you so much, Steve. So we're going to move now on to our panel discussion. So we have three speakers for this. We have our ID ANP Maurice Healy. We have our INMO President and ED ANP Karen McGowan. And we also have Community Midwife Aisling Dixon. So we're going to start first with Maurice. So Maurice is an advanced nurse practitioner specialising in intellectual disability in Ireland and has over 35 years experience as a nurse, lecturer and staff trainer. He trained as a registered nurse in intellectual disabilities in 1987, subsequently qualifying as a behavioural therapist, and he continued his education by completing a diploma in training and development and a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. He then completed his Masters of Science in Intellectual Disabilities at the University of Birmingham in 2012, and he currently works for the Brothers of Charity covering the Galway region. So on a daily basis, Maurice utilises behavioural assessment to direct the use of practical strategies and surrounds grounded in the model of positive behavioural support to support individuals and their families, and his specialist areas of interest are autism and the impact of sensory processing and integration. So thank you so much, Maurice, for being here today, and I'll let you start.
Thanks, Roisin. That sounds lovely when you read it out like that. It's great. I was just listening to Steve there, and it's nice to hear that somebody else has over 30-something years experience in the field as well. And he's right. I spent most of my time as a staff nurse, and then went to clinical nurse specialist. So I suppose about 20-something of the years of that were staff nurse level. So he's absolutely right. There's a role for all of us there at different levels. And the other one of making yourself a go-to person. That's what I did in terms of my role in behavior. I became the go-to person for behavioral difficulties, and my organization was then quite happy to fund me as well for advancing my learning, and they assisted me with the funding for the masters in Birmingham as well. So those things are out there, and I echo everything that Steve said. So Gormil Mahagad Roshin Asoktan Quera, thank you for the invitation to speak. I'm going to try and share my screen. Is that possible for me to do? Yeah.
You'll see there's a little green tab in the middle.
Yeah.
Of the screen.
And okay, can you see that?
Yeah, that's perfect. So just pop it
Okay,
into the
I won't put it
slideshow.
on, what you call it, I won't put it on PowerPoint if everybody is happy enough to kind of look at it like that. As you said, I chose the role ANP in intellectual disabilities, and I chose the title because I still wanted to be an ANP for the people that I support, even when it wasn't around the behaviours that challenge. Because if I was an ANP in behaviours that challenge, I felt that only reflected my support for those people who had behaviours that challenged. So I asked at the time if I could have ANP in intellectual disabilities because, well, there was only one of me at the time in ID, and I wanted to reflect that most of the time the people that I support are not engaging in behaviours to challenge. So I chose that title for that reason. But my role primarily is in the role of behaviours to challenge or behaviours of concern. People have different terminology for it. I don't mind which term you use. Just not challenging behavior. It's one that's kind of outdated. So behaviors of concern or behaviors to challenge. And in that role in my organization, we have a policy on behaviors of challenge. And number one on that policy is building therapeutic relationships with individuals. I'd even say building relationships with individuals, because in order to understand somebody, you need to know where they're coming from. So that piece around building relationships is part and parcel of the 37 years that I have spent in nursing. And I'd also like to remind you that we're kind of steeped in nursing in my family. My mother was a nurse, my aunt was a nurse, and my son is training to be a nurse. So very much kind of affirmation that you've chosen a role that those of us who are in are happy to kind of see our children go into as well. A colleague of mine that I work with, his son has gone into nursing as well. So just to say, we know our faith is there in the nursing profession. The thing about myself, I suppose, as an advanced nurse practitioner is I have a role within the West Services of the Brothers of Charity, and that's right across the service. I don't rotate out of this role to a different service. So I have consistency of approach right across the areas that I work. And I know the individuals that I'm supporting, some of them for over 20 odd years. Some of them I met as teenagers, and I have minimal support to them now because we managed to stabilize them. And how we managed that was we build on and we reestablish things that were successful for us in the past. So we may have had strategies that were successful, and because we were good at them, people became a little bit complacent, maybe kind of felt, that's fine, we don't need that stuff anymore. Maybe we shouldn't be kind of doing those kind of things, or maybe we can take out a few of the supports and then people fall again. So we need to maybe build that back up again. I talk about it as scaffolding. When you put scaffolding under somebody, you don't take it away when they're at the if they're painting the house and they're at the up at the gable end, you don't start taking out the poles at the bottom and say, "You're grand, you're up there now, you'll be fine. We'll take these couple of bars, we'll need them." And people fall from a great height, and that's the problem in my area of work, is when people fall through complacency, it takes a while to get them back. And the other area that I was involved in, and I trained in this when I was a student nurse, was skills teaching and behavioral change strategies. We learned behavioral change mechanisms when we were student nurses, and we learned task analysis and skills teaching for individuals, because the more skills somebody has in maintaining their own independence, the less they have to use a behavior to get their message across to us as nurses in the field. And one of the most important slides I think I use on every course I give is that from a behavior perspective, when I go in to talk to staff, I ask people to look at the behavior from that person's perspective and say to yourself, if you were them, would you behave this way? And the answer in a lot of cases is, I probably would, Morris, yeah. And I said, well, then let's ask ourselves, why are they behaving in that way? Take yourself around, have a look at life from their perspective and ask yourself, what would I do if I was here? And if you were going to behave in a way that others found challenging, why is that? And what have we done to this person that makes them behave in this particular way? And then how can we help them actually get out of this? So in this particular slide here, and I use this particularly in relation to somebody who may be working with a person who's autistic or somebody who's on the autism spectrum, you really do need to take that imaginative leap, because it's very hard in my area of work for people with an intellectual disability to take that walk around and see things from my perspective. Okay, because of the intellectual disability, because of the circumstances that they find themselves in. So we as nurses have to make that imaginative leap across and see things from other people's perspective. And what you see when you get there is that sometimes people are terribly stressed by their environment. And when people are stressed, they tend to repeat things. So, you know, we talk about people who might engage in repetitive questioning as a behavior that challenges, or somebody who's resistant to change. I probably would say that every one of us sitting listening to this or listening to me speak at the minute are probably resistant to change as well. We don't like things changing in our life. We know where everything is in our kitchen and we don't want anybody disturbing it. We don't want people moving the cups from the saucer drawer or from the plate drawer or from the saucepan drawer into somewhere else. And somebody will find yourselves going back to old presses looking for stuff that have changed. So we are resistant to change. And yet we as staff come in and start to change the environments into what we think they should be. Some people are preoccupied with topics, objects, or people. I have friends and they're completely fascinated by GAA results and GAA teams of the 80s and soccer teams of the 70s and 80s, and they can name things. I'm particularly interested in music, and I can name number ones from particular years to friends, and they go, how do you do that? And I said, I just associate it with stuff. Most people don't find that kind of stuff all that interesting. I have a buddy and he talks GAA up the wazoo, and I've told him 100 times, I said, I'm not really that au fait with it, but he still keeps doing it to me. So I told him I'm going to buy earplugs and put them in whenever he talks. So we're all preoccupied with topics or objects or people. And we all have problems making choices, and we all react differently to sensory experiences. One of the ones I'll give you a quick heads up in is a thing called misophonia, which is the reaction we have to the sounds other people make when they're eating. And a lot of us will have that kind of resistance to that kind of thing. So the touch of wool on your skin, chalk scraping down a chalkboard. And how many of us don't want to be alone? And yet in the environments that I work in, it's very hard for people to be alone. In congregated settings or even in houses with 4 individuals, it's very hard to find a place to hide. Some people will hurt themselves, they may harm others, or they may damage property. In most cases like that, I'm looking at the person and asking myself, what's wrong first internally, because I need to address that. Some people will have unusual behaviors, rocking, jumping, twisting, turning, flicking fingers or objects. A lot of us have those as well. We will do things and people say, please stop doing that. And you go, what am I doing? You keep repeating that thing with your hands. And I've seen that on many courses I give. I watch people's behavior and I watch them engaging in behaviors that we say about others, particularly those with an intellectual disability or in older person services. That's a behavior that challenges, or that's a behavior of concern. Maybe it isn't. Maybe the person is just stressed out by their environment and we need to unstress that environment for them. I'll show you a couple of little slides later on. For, as I said, the individuals that I'm supporting, you have individuals with sensory issues. And the thing about sensory issues is you can be hypersensitive to them or you can be hyposensitive to them. So if you take, I'm hypersensitive to loud noises. I'm not able to handle them. So I will remove myself from a situation where there are loud noises. And yet I worked with a colleague of mine who is hyposensitive. She couldn't hear them. And she's a wonderful person to work in an environment where it may be noisy. But I'm not, but I'm probably a good individual to work in another area where behaviors may have a different kind of manifestation. And people with sensory issues like this can't easily filter information because there are 8 senses to consider. So you have the 5 that you know already, touch, taste, vision, hearing, and smell. And then you have proprioception, knowing where you are in space, vestibular, balance, and interoceptive, how your body feeds back internally is to to what's going on. So hunger, tiredness, nausea would be one that you feel internally, it'd be interoceptive. And then individuals like that have difficulty with focus. So if I could just get you even to think about, if you're trying to read a newspaper and the radio's on and somebody's talking to you, that's when you find it difficult to focus. So we do this to people on a regular basis in our organization. We don't do it deliberately, but we do it, and we really need to take stock of what is it we're actually doing to individuals. And then when we find that out, using things like the Kaplan and Wheeler cycle to go, okay, what are the triggers in this environment? What does it look like when this person escalates? What does a crisis look like? How long does it take for that person to come back down? And where can I intervene? So if you're looking and that arrow is working, if I'm here at normal triggering phase, which is generally your normal behavior, if you escalate, we need to be adding in strategies around this escalation phase to help people come back down, to get back to that normal or triggering phase. Unfortunately, a lot of cases, people add fuel to the fire because they don't understand what they're doing, and then end up actually triggering a crisis for that individual. And the unfortunate thing, I suppose, in my line of work is the individuals we support have an intellectual disability. They have very few skills verbally to defend themselves in terms of what happened. And they're not able to say, this environment is driving me mad. I wanted you to stop doing what you're doing. And the only way I could get you to do that, because you weren't listening, was to hit out, or to hit myself, or to break a window or break a mirror. I need somebody to listen. So this is where we really need to intervene. And again, I know I'm speaking about my own area, but this is my A&P in behavior, and it is that look into a specialist service. So this is where I approach my work, is to look at what are we doing that's causing these behaviors to occur in the first place, and how, you know, we need to quickly stop what we're doing so that people have a chance to de-escalate. So adding in interventions at that escalation phase, and these interventions will look like this. Appearing calm is a skill you learn. It's not something you come easily with. I was reading a piece on somebody this morning who rescued a young lady from a swimming incident. And he said, when I got to their two friends on the beach, they were in an absolute panic. Now, he'll arrive and appear calm because he's skilled in this area. Same for me. I arrive to behavioral incidences. I appear calm when I get there, which is very, you know, it's reassuring for staff that are in the middle of a crisis. Say, okay, and I'd say, I tell you what, head away now, let me look after this for a few minutes, and you get a bit of a chance to decompress. Respect personal space, be aware of touch, listen to people with your eyes and ears, use distraction, communicate verbally, non-verbally, remove other people if possible, debrief post-incident, record and review and learn, and don't be a can of petrol at fire. Be a fire extinguisher, trying to put things out quickly so that they don't escalate to the point where a person's in crisis. So they're the kind of supportive strategies that I encourage staff to use in our area of work. But also I would say to you, any of you who are going to work in the general field or in older person services, these are exactly the same, regardless of the area you're in. This works right across the spectrum for us nurses, whether you're working in A&E, or whether you're working in a ward, or whether you're in mental health or intellectual disability or midwifery. All of those things there are hugely important for individuals to help them relax. And I suppose one of the main areas for us as nurses is that we encompass all the circles in this, the biopsychosocial model. We have a lot of skill in the biological field. And there's been a move, I suppose, in my area towards a more social element to the work that we do. But when you do that exclusively, you begin to lose sight of biological issues that may be affecting behaviors. And in the case of a young man in the UK, he paid for that with his life because people stopped paying attention to his medical needs of chronic constipation and weren't monitoring his food intake, and his medication changed without major consultation, and he lost his life. So, you know, from this perspective, and this is where when I'm talking to my own organization, you need somebody who's skilled. So from a biological perspective, I have a nursing background. From a psychological perspective, I did behavior therapy in UCC in Cork. And from a social one, it encompasses both of those. And to be that, understand the social interaction of us with others, and how that works. And part of my behavioral piece and my nursing encompasses that. So for you guys listening to me who are new graduates, take the biopsychosocial model and understand where you fit into this, regardless of the area you're working. And always remember that people's ability to adapt is based on how they're doing psychologically, biologically, and socially. if you're working with somebody who is unwell, so biologically they're going to be compromised, their ability to adapt to changing circumstances is going to change quite quickly. Also, their ability to interact socially, because they may be carrying an illness. In the case of the individuals that I work with, it's generally psychologically, biologically, social, because they're affected in all areas because of the intellectual disability, and they may also have comorbidities as well. So this is where, from a nursing perspective, this model is particularly good, because it shows how we, as nurses, based on our training, encompass all three areas. And also then the simplified model, Roisin mentioned positive behavioral support. At its basic level, you're looking at people's physiology. How are they? How's the person? Are they well? If they're not, how do we address that issue? Who's working with them? Have we good nurses? Have we good staff? Have we good management structure? Have we in a nice environment that the person is in and that they're happy in? And have we a method for them to communicate? If we have all these areas covered and there's still issues to address, I'll come in here around the behavior management and skills development. And that's at its basic, the most kind of comprehensive snapshot I can give you of what positive behavior support looks like. And you don't need to be a behavioral expert down here to get these things right. This is where I come in at behavior management and skills development, behavior change, but I will ensure these areas are addressed first by talking to you in your new roles. If any of you come across me, maybe in older person services or in intellectual disability, or sometimes in mental health, we'll ask these questions first, okay? And also, I suppose one of the things people don't kind of get from time to time in my area of work is people can be seeking and resisting the same thing. They can be seeking interaction with you, but resisting the pitch of your voice. They can be seeking a chat, but resisting the tone. They can be seeking an activity, but resisting the activity that you're given. So I would say, you know, if you use the phrase swings and roundabouts, they might be seeking out a swing, but resisting a roundabout in terms of play. Sensory inputs might be seeking out tangible things, but resisting color. Might be seeking out particular tastes, but resisting the fact that food is touching on the plate or whatever. And it can be a bit difficult for staff to understand from time to time, why did he call me over, asked to talk to me, and then hit me? And I said, it's probably seeking and resisting, seeking the interaction, but resisting the tone of your voice. So, you know, those things, it's hugely important. This is an area that a lot of people don't actually get, or maybe wouldn't have come across in the behavioral field. And this is my mantra. It's easier for 10 of us without an intellectual disability to learn one agreed way to do things, so that we're consistent in our approach, rather than 10 of us coming in doing something different and expecting the person who is older or may have an intellectual disability to learn our 10 different ways of doing things, that we agree a consistent approach. And that's where I write the behavior support plans for staff. And when I'm finished here today, or with you guys, I'm updating one and sending it over to a house, so that we still are consistent in our approach, and we still put that scaffolding under individuals. And when we do that, this is what happens. So I'm just going to move the pictures over. This is an individual who 233 incidences of behavior in 2010 and 8 in 2021. I haven't collated his things. A lot of this was down to communication. This man is a fluent Irish speaker. When you speak to him in Irish, he understands things. When he's stressed, he engages in behaviors to challenge, because not everybody that was working with him could communicate to him quickly enough in Irish to tell him everything was okay. They kept telling him in English. So it's the equivalent, if you were under stress at the moment and you asked me to intervene and I spoke to you in French, you'd get even more frustrated. So this young man actually lives in the Gaeltacht in Connemara, in a place called Indravon, and he responds when people lower Goigalish. And we have phonetic positive behavior support plans written for him. So it's written in Irish, it's written in English, and then it's written phonetically. You know, chaos, who he'd say, and so we would write that as KAYOSTHU, chaos, who, where are you from? And I'd say in the Forbacha, and he would respond instantly when you speak Irish to him. So we have them there phonetically for anybody who wouldn't be an Irish speaker. First resort strategies, again, looking at what do we do before we go in and try and change the person. Engage, interact, reward, build that relationship, minimize downtimes, make positive behavior more useful than behaviors to challenge. And here's another individual that I was working with. That should say 2021. I updated it this morning. he went from 118 very serious incidences to 1 so far this year. And that's down to environmental and having good staff and him having a communication system. We didn't need to change his behavior. We needed to change what we were doing for him. And that's where that good scaffolding comes in to help individuals in terms of their support, because this is what we built for him now. So he's particularly secure up here, but this is what he had initially. Okay. And when we do that, those kind of things, we ensure that equality and equity, but more importantly, that the person is fostered to be more independent in terms of their life, and therefore don't have to use their behaviors to get the message across. Essentially, don't let a fire in a room become a room on fire. Shine, Guramil Mahdi, and I hope and wish you well in your future careers. And if you have any behavioral issues, I'm always at the other end of an email for anybody who wants to contact me, because sometimes we have wonderful information that people just need to ask. Did I go too fast or too slow, Roisin?
No, that was perfect, Maurice. Thank you so much. And
No
I
problem.
suppose I just wanted to ask you, I suppose, one quick question, and that was just, what do you enjoy most about your role?
And I'm back today after my 2 weeks holidays. So I think it's the bit where you're going in and asking, what can we do to change what's going on? And then to see those two graphs, you know, if you're looking at that graph there, if it's still on screen, that's what gives me joy, because that's true. That information can be checked on our air system. That young man would be known to a lot of staff. When I put that chart up in a talk, I would say to people in the room, you know who I'm talking about? They go, yeah, we know absolutely what you're talking about. So it's that kind of thing there, Roisin. Now, that'd be lovely if I was able to do that for everybody. And that's our goal, is to try and reduce them down. And that's what we've been successful at, myself and the team that I work with, particularly frontline staff. We're particularly good at this when we get our ducks in a row. And I would say being an advanced nurse practitioner and being a clinical nurse specialist has helped me with that. Being a nurse predominantly has been to the forefront of my behavior stuff all down through my career. I value my nursing hugely, and I'm terribly proud of it. Yeah, it's making that difference, and then ensuring that stuff stays in place. And as an advanced nurse practitioner, I can insist that those scaffolding stay in place, because you have that level of authority and kind of practice ownership, I suppose, that I have autonomy in that role to make those calls.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Maurice. I'm going to move now to our INMO president, Karen. So I'm just going to do a little bio on Karen, even though I'm sure I don't need to explain too much, but as well as being the president of the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation, Karen is an advanced nurse practitioner in the emergency department of Dublin's Beaumont Hospital. She qualified in 2008 as a nurse and has worked in the emergency department since, in various roles from staff nurse to CNM2. Whilst in those roles, she completed her postgraduate diploma in emergency nursing and a master's in nursing in the Royal College of Surgeons. And she also holds certificates in the prescribing of drug and ionizing radiation, as well as a certificate in advanced clinical skills from UCD. So thank you so much, Karen, and I'll let you start.
That's great. Thanks a million, Roisin. I really appreciate that. And thanks for having me on. I have to say, I've been looking forward to this. It's a great opportunity to see people at the beginning of their careers. It's so important, as I said earlier on. It's great to get all the information at the beginning, because you can always reflect back and think, oh, what were they talking about that day? I must look into that. So I just want to see, is that sharing okay? Can anybody see it? Oh, it's gone blank here. Sorry now.
It's showing the end of the slideshow, Karen. I think maybe if you press back, it might go back. Just
maybe if I stop sharing, maybe 1 second.
Yeah, take your time.
Sorry. You'd think it would be slicker at this crack now, but anyway, here we are. Try again. Now, how does that, if you can see that?
Yeah,
yep.
You can see it. Thanks, Karen.
Brilliant. Oops. So as Roisin rightly said, I am an AMP in the emergency department here in Beaumont Hospital. I have been in the role for the last 5 years. I have spent all my career in the emergency department, which I have absolutely thoroughly enjoy, and it's an area that I just feel at home in, and it is my home, I suppose. And it's an area just where I thrive, just like Morris has highlighted in his area as well. So I suppose advanced practice, yeah, we have excelled in advanced practice in Ireland, and I have to say this just isn't promoted enough. And I'm so glad, we have this opportunity to showcase what Ireland has to offer in terms of advanced practice with the upcoming ICN APN conference that is taking place in UCD at the weekend. Advanced practice, I suppose, there's been many struggles in nursing that has created this pressure time and time again. And, this hasn't, the new roles in advanced practice, this hasn't happened by luck, but through the perseverance from the INMO, as David Miskell highlighted earlier on today, between having the dispute in 1999, which led to the implementation of the Commission on Nursing. And again, we had our own dispute again then in 2019, which led to the enhanced nurse and midwifery scales and more funding for AMPs. So as I say, these disputes have led to these improvements. And again, it's about having that collective approach. And the activism within the INMO has been pivotal, and it's down to you, the members, participating in all of that. I suppose the Department of Health have committed to increasing the number of AMPs from 0.2% to 2% of the overall workforce back in 2019. And I suppose the rationale for this is to provide patients with greater access to the service, particularly in relation to the time to be seen and the location of these services. And, there's huge discussions about in the community and so on. The value of advanced practice has been well documented, and the continuance of this is crucial for the future of service delivery in Ireland. And again, having disputes creates pressure, as we do. And, our famous INMO line definitely has to be used in this instance. No pressure, no progress. It definitely, anything good that we've achieved has come from the huge amount of pressure. And again, being part of the INMO is part of being part of that collective piece, and being together through the hard times, we can achieve most of great things that we have done already. The INMO's involvement in advanced practice has been pivotal to create more and more posts, and this is again down to you, the members. So I suppose my background, as Roisin said, I went to ED after being newly qualified. I was just really, my head was turned when I was a student. I just loved the environment, loved thriving in it, and the fact that you were learning something new every day, and you were seeing new patients every day, which was great. I was very supported in my area when I started. We had very good CNMs, very supportive role modeling, and that was really beneficial to me moving forward in terms of my education. Our leaders in the emergency department were very encouraging and very supportive during those educational pieces. So again, that was really, really important. I started off my postgrad in emergency nursing, and then that I progressed on to do my master's then after, and I've done my specialist cert in prescribe and ionization, and obviously the advanced health assessment. All the while this was happening, I suppose I moved from staff nurse to CNM2, which was hugely beneficial to me, as this gives you, your leadership skills, the practical aspect of being a leader in a very difficult environment. And autonomy. So, if you can keep an ED safe, you can definitely manage yourself and how you conduct your business as an advanced nurse practitioner, for sure. Different roles, I suppose different. I would have gone into advanced practice in a different way to what people are doing now in terms of the different pathways that there are. But back then, when I was doing my studies, there were no AMP roles, and I was just kind of waiting in the wings for my role to become available, and thankfully it did. And so I have to say I've never looked back since. I just knew advanced practice was where I wanted to be, and it's where, I suppose, to use what Roisin was saying, what gives you joy. That is what gives me joy. You have the patient contact. You can see the improvements, you can see the benefits, you can see people get to the place where they want to be, and essentially that's the role of the rapid assessment nurse. So my title is Rapid Assessment and Treatment. I suppose it was established as an A&P service in 2017. Prior to that, there was a lot of research done in terms of, showing the worth of this service. It was this first rapid assessment treatment A&P was established in St. Vincent's, and then in Our Lady of Lourdes, and then in Beaumont Hospital itself. So I suppose the rationale, we had protracted delays for category 2s and 3s presented to the emergency department. We had huge delays, huge numbers. And this is where I suppose the role evolved, where we could demonstrate that nurses could practice within a set number of protocols. And obviously we all practice within our scope, but we are protected by our protocols. So again, it's just protecting your practices. This was discussed earlier on in the day as well with Edward Matthews. So again, international studies have shown that overcrowding EDs is associated with an increased mortality and poorer outcomes for patients, whether admitted or discharged following assessment in an overcrowded emergency department. This all lended itself to us developing the service and developing more roles within the emergency department. A 7-year study of the ED admissions in Ireland found that delays to admission was an independent predictor of increased mortality with 30 days. And obviously that was one of our Irish consultants who conducted that piece of work. So as I mentioned, the scope of practice, what we see. So we would see patients that would present to the emergency department with shortness of breath, chest pain, skin and soft tissue infections, soft tissue abscesses, abdominal pain, deep vein thrombosis, removal of patients from C-spine precautions, back pain, possible neck of femur, pelvic fractures, ear, nose and throat and dental conditions, needle stick injuries and diabetic emergencies, to name but a few. We do have an array of patients that we see, but again, we have protocols for each of these presentations that come to the emergency department, and we just follow the protocol, and obviously it's clinical judgment and so on and so forth. But yeah, we have a great array of symptoms that we see, and there's great variety in each of our days, and no day is the same, and that's what I love about that. So in 2021, rapid assessment numbers. So we've seen 2,866 were assessed, treated and diagnosed in all patients attending the emergency department. 2,550 had their care completed within the national target of less than 6 hours. 132 of their patient care completed within 6 to 9 hours, which was in keeping with the extended national target of 9 hours. But again, as advanced nurse practitioners, we strive to do better and better, and this is something that we really are keen to do better on in the terms of our patient experience time. 2,460 of all patients assessed by the rapid assessment team were discharged, and 637 were referred for admission, again in keeping in line with national targets. So in conclusion, the report from the Department of Health showed that on average 4.3 patients per A&P are avoiding hospital admission on a weekly basis. The average reduction of 3.9 patients per week from a specialist waiting list. A reduction of the overall patient experience time of up to 2 hours and 43 per patient seen in the emergency care by us A&Ps. And our study, again, it was a retrospective study, confirms that Department of Health and highlights the need for implementation of more A&P roles in the emergency departments. It expedites the care, improves patient outcomes, and this is essentially, this can very much be replicated in some of the other EDs nationally, and some of the other EDs are in the process of building business cases and so on. And we, as A&Ps, we're very lucky that we can call upon each other and get that experience, get how do you start the service and so on. It's great to be able to call on each other for that experience. And again, it's in keeping with the themes of the ICNAPN conference. We learn, we innovate, and we advance. And definitely that really synopses what advanced practice is about, and we're always evolving, always learning, and that's, I think, the day that we stop learning, that's the day we need to hang up the boots. But again, yeah, to me, like my job, it's a fantastic job, and it's really, really rewarding, and it's so diverse, and it's definitely something to strive for if you have a particular interest in the emergency department. I suppose one thing I was thinking about this over the last week in preparation for today, I suppose things that I'd like to say to people that are starting off their careers is to know your worth and your boundaries. It is so important. to know your worth. Where you are going to be in difficult situations, but know your worth. You've come through this training, you've done it all, and you're at a stage now, you know, you're standing on your own 2 feet. Remember to keep within your scope of practice. That's what keeps you safe. That's what protects you. Nobody dictates that to you. That is something that you dictate to yourself. So you know what you're capable of, you know what your boundaries are, and that will keep you safe. I'd always say make time for yourself. I know it's very difficult, but look, it's so important to keep the longevity of your career. It is a very demanding one, and our environments change, and we've seen that over the last 2 years. So I think that's really, really important. We do adopt some form of making time for ourselves. One thing I'll say as well, we all have family, so definitely try and get the family balance between work and life. It's really difficult, but I think as nurses, we learn to juggle our lives very early. So we learn to continue that, but definitely keep it going. And I suppose one thing I wanted to say as well is, despite this A&P role that I absolutely love, and the many other roles that I have as well, it would be, I suppose, remiss of me not to say that my favorite job is this one. These two drive me to be the best that I can be for the patients that I look after. And, you know, family is so important. We all have them, be it the partners, our husbands, wives, mums, dads, sisters, brothers, and not forgetting our furry animals too. They are so important, as they are what make us who we are as nurses, and, you know, they keep us balanced. And I think it's really important that we recognize, you know, that we do have our families to go home to, and it's not all about you know, it's not everything that we're all doing and all the courses and so on. We need to remember to, you know, what grounds us, and that is our families, whoever they may be. So it's really important just to remember just to take away from that and all the seriousness of starting out as a new grad. Because I know I definitely, when I started, I felt, oh my God, the mental load was huge. So thank you very much for your time. And look, if there are any other questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer them. So thanks very much, Roisin.
Thank you so much, Karen. And just, I suppose, the point there you made at the end about your family, you know, anyone that knows me knows my dog is my absolute number one. So I completely resonate with that point. It's so, so important to make time for your family as well. You can get very caught up, particularly at the start of your career, with, you know, trying to manage work and things like that, but it all comes with time. And now we move on to Aisling Dixon, our community midwife. So Aisling is nursing in St. James's Hospital, and then completed her midwifery training in London in 1999. Following a few years working in the UK, she moved on to New Zealand, which, together with her UK experience and exposure, gave her a passion for supporting normal physiological birth and choice of birth environments. She then returned to Ireland in 1995 and commenced working in Portunkula as a midwife. She then moved on to C&M, and then completed her master's in advanced midwifery practice. She commenced working as an independent midwife in 2006, finding the medicalised birth environment and lack of supported choice of birth challenging, and continues to provide this service to date. So thank you so much, Aisling, and I'll let you take it away. I can see your presentation and everything, just so you know.
Super, that's great. Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, everyone. My name is Aisling Dixon, as Roisin said. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just to say congratulations to getting to this point. And definitely you've got lots of the skills that it takes to be a nurse and a midwife, having come through your education in the last 4 years, in particular in light of COVID, with regard to flexibility and dexterity and all those other things. So well done in getting this far. And I wish you a long and healthy and happy career as you choose it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about being a community midwife, which is slightly on the margins of midwifery care at the moment, even though there's definitely a lot of talk, you know, about promoting normal birth, but really what we should be doing is protecting normal birth. It is the biological norm, which the evidence does say that it is what women want for their birth. So we need to be, as Maurice referred to before, we need to be aware that, like, you know, protecting birth is about not only the biomedical model, which has probably influenced a lot in the hospital setting with regard to the medicalization of childbirth, but also the social and the psychological aspects of birth, because we do know that sometimes up to 1/3 of women come out of their birth psychologically traumatized despite their experience. And so I work with I'm a self-employed community midwife with the Community Midwives Association that was founded in 2008, so after I came to Ireland. and we are the group of midwives that provide the HSE home birth service under the contract of an MOU and agreement. There's also the Private Midwives Ireland who provide private home birth service. Then there is also the services out of some of the hospitals, including Waterford and the National Maternity Hospital. And our differences are very much probably along governance and payment structures and hours worked and things like that. But when you're in the woman's home, providing care antenatally, postnatally, or during labour and birth, what we do is very much the same. So I'm just going to show you a little video about what we do as home birth midwives, and then I'll continue on.
Comes creeping in, illuminates our skin. We watch the day go by, stories of what we did. It made me think of you, it made me think of you. Under the twinkling stars, we danced on top of clouds, took pictures of the stage, so far from where we are. They made me think of you, they made me think of you. Oh, lights go down, in the moment we lost and found. I just wanna be by your side. If these wings could fly for the rest of our lives. I'm in the forest, my thoughts they slip away. My words are leaving me, they come back because I thought of you, just from the thought of you. Oh, lights go down, in the moment we lost and found. I just wanna be by your side. If these wings could fly, oh, damn these walls. In the moment when 10 feet tall, and how you told me after it all. We remember tonight for the rest of our lives.
So that's what midwifery means to me. So a lot of people might think that being a midwife is all about the babies, but actually it's very much about the women and the families and supporting them to have the most perfect birth possible for them, and that they're engaged and in that process wherever that might happen. So it isn't always at home. It's about, you know, a safe birth, but it's also about a positive birth experience. So we want women to survive and thrive through their birth. So, you know, you do need to be a little bit maybe of kind of a slightly feminist perspective as well too, so that we can advocate for women and respect their autonomy and choice at this time. So we are here, the National Maternity, it has been well recognised, I suppose, that midwifery-led care and offering choice to women within their home and alongside birth centres, you know, it does improve outcomes for women and babies, that when women are healthy and well, that there is no reason for them not to have a birth that's not in a medicalised hospital. That is the strategy of the National Maternity Strategy 2016-2026, and particularly along the supported care pathway, which is the one that we work in, obviously, for providing home birth care and that as well too. And while we're halfway through, or a little more than halfway through the strategy, we remain optimistic that there will be developments. A lot is going to change in the provision of maternity care in the next couple of years, and we hope that alongside birth units and a supported birth at home is in that plan. And why we need to be worried, I suppose, is that that intervention rates are becoming too high. We definitely are in a situation where there's too little too late and too much too soon. So in some countries, there is a lack of access to care, causes maternal morbidity and mortality, and also perinatal morbidity and mortality. But actually, we're in a worse situation now, and that actually there's much more evidence that more harm has been done by that too much too soon approach, where we intervene too early, we offer too many medications, we induce too often, we do too many cesarean sections, that actually now we've tipped into a point where actually there's more harm being done by women being over medicalized rather than actually not having access to maternity care. So that has led to that right mnemonic, that right amount at the right time. So it's about recognizing women who are safe and well and continue on in a normal care pathway, in the supported care pathway, and including that they're planned to birth at home, as opposed to women who are not being recognized and managed properly. And we're very fortunate in working as home birth midwives, and that actually there's very strong evidence to back the safety of the service. And there's been 2 recent studies reviewing birth outcomes over 12 years, and also one of over 500,000 births. So it's certainly not, it's a very well researched area. There is very high quality, to say, you know, midwifery-led care in that environment and other environments, but this is around home birth services, have very good outcomes for women and babies, and don't show adverse outcomes for the right cohort of women to experience that care at the right time. You know, bad outcomes do happen at home, and also bad outcomes happen in a hospital. Being in a birthing in hospital doesn't protect all babies. Birthing at home doesn't protect all women, but vice versa. But in line with the evidence and maternal choice and respect of their choice and giving them agency and control, definitely home birth is a safe option for women and their babies. And we need now not so much that we don't need more evidence. I guess we're in a position that actually there's lots of evidence to support this service, and now we need expansion and implementation. But what we do offer to women on top of an evidence-based service is a physiologically supported birth alternative. We do know, as I said before, that women value the opportunity to birth physiologically, and we do know that actually for health outcomes in the future, that it is the best for women, that babies who choose to go into labour themselves and women that are supported physiologically without intervention have the best health outcomes. It is relationship-based care, and that is that respectful relationship between women and their midwife that also helps them to have the confidence to disclose things they may not disclose elsewhere, and also that they can, you know, trust their embodied intuitive knowledge, and also that we can see things because we know these women that are out of the norm for them. And we also see them in their own homes, so there's things you can pick up that you may not pick up in a 10-15-minute clinic appointment. These are all typically, you know, definitely at the start of their pregnancy, a healthy, well, low risk group of women, and sometimes their risk status can change. And it's about recognizing that and giving them care appropriately with it, respecting their choice. Also, the service works best if it's well resourced and in collaboration with hospital facilities. You know, we've definitely moved in the last 100 years, where before that, you know, midwifery was very much standalone. It didn't require obstetrics to okay it, but we are in a situation now. So, but for the most part, access to obstetric, care and facilities influences how midwifery is provided in this context. Rightly or wrongly, that's up for debate. But we do where we can. It definitely supports women better. There's more respect between collegial respect and respect for our practice when we provide care in collaboration. Are not, it's not a them and us scenario. That, and I'm very fortunate. I've worked at Portugal Hospital since 2005, so 17 years ago. I'm providing home birth service for 16 years of that, and actually have been recognised as a safe practitioner in the hospital. Definitely supports me to support women to access a home birth service. And we provide care from booking. So for some women, they link in with us literally as time of a pregnancy test. For some, they have a negative experience throughout their early hospital care that has them come to us. For some, they become more aware of a home birth service later on in their pregnancy. Lots of reasons. COVID, for example, was one that brought many women to home birth, and it's rarely when a woman comes to a home birth that they will go back into the hospital system. So we wouldn't typically book women over after 35 weeks because that doesn't give us enough time to develop a relationship, to share the knowledge, to ensure that the birth happens for the right reasons. It's usually earlier than that, up until 14 days postnatal, including labour and birth. And what you need to do this is not, so this is what, when Steve was talking earlier about a little bit of job crafting, there's definitely a little bit that goes on, in the Irish context. It is easier to look after a woman in labour ward with, diabetes and twins and premature labour than it is to look after a healthy, well woman at home in the community from a governance point of view. Hopefully that'll change over time, or we'll certainly meet somewhere in the middle. But for the moment, you do need to be, job crafting and getting the skills that make you feel confident that in a couple of years' time, you consider this way of work. So you need a love of midwifery, a love of women, a love of babies. You need to be happy to work both independently and part of a team. So it's definitely times you're working on your own as a sole practitioner, but also that you link in with the sports virtually or in your local group of team membership and have good support. That is within your midwifery group, within your family, within your greater community. It has to be an element of flexibility. And even with that, though, there's lots that you can organise within job, but when women birth, that's the bit you need to be flexible about. We also, have to contribute actively to midwifery issues. There's lots of obviously engagement that's needed, a representation. We're a small group of midwives, so we can be a bit thin on the ground, but we have to advocate and be active politically and socially in that as well too. You need to have a full license, obviously, or someone to drive you around, be a member for our organisation, and that membership gives you access to public liability insurance. And obviously, ever ready your car phone. That was full tank, but that was pre-electric cars. Obviously, a fully charged car either, and a charged mobile phone. And then obviously to meet your kind of organizational and governance requirements and that as well too. And what is involved for as a self-employed community midwife. So every day is different. Your busyness or your availability or what you do day to day just depends on the number of women you choose to look after. I take somewhere between maybe 10 and 14 women a year because I also work full time in the hospital. I'm just completing my advanced midwifery practice and I will be that from September onwards then. And then but we provide antenatal and postnatal care, and that depends on what's needed. It can be a little bit more, a little bit less. You might see women a little bit extra if they go to 10 or 12 days post-dates. You might see a woman a little bit extra postnatally if it's her first baby and she requires support with breastfeeding. But if it's a fairly straightforward postnatal path, then it might be a little bit different. You obviously attend the labour and the birth, and you have to make yourself on call for that as well too. And also you'll also support other midwives. We have 2 midwives at every birth, so you'll also support other midwives as their second midwife. So once they attend a woman in labour and they have an assessment of what's going on, then you engage with them and then come and attend to them. We have lots of documentation. Obviously our midwifery notes are one, but also issues, birth registration, organising hearing tests, newborn screening, newborn blood spot screening, all those other checks that need to be done, as well as just ambulance and all that. That's part of just doing the job. We also have to obviously engage in ongoing education. There's that around meeting the requirements of our MOU, but also part of that is that actually that's very much based on risk. So we also obviously to keep our much more normal philosophy, obviously engage lots of education around supporting optimal birth and positivity and So lots of our midwives would be, either trained as lactation consultants or do other therapies like, acupuncture, reflexology, would be hypnobirthing educators or childbirth educated, baby massage. So there's lots of other skills that we bring to it. And then obviously, we support students whom we can to come out with us to have that continuity of care experience. And then we mentor new midwives who are considering working with self-employed community midwives, particularly as they need a few births initially before they take on their own caseload. And obviously then we also have to do all that's involved in meeting our contractual agreements and that as well too. And all that might come with that. But it does offer us something as midwives, and we do know that actually with this group, there would be very little, midwives tend to be slow to come, but then they also tend to be slow to leave. And lots of often circumstances outside midwifery that have midwives leaving. Their role is self-employed community midwives. And it is something that you maybe do for a few years. For some people, it's a lifetime career, and for others, it's very part-time, and for others, it's for a short time. So there's no right or wrong way. It's such as the nature of nursing and midwifery. It offers great flexibility and adaptability in how and where you are in your life, and that as well too. But we do have great professional and midwifery collegiality, and we're linked in with universities and with other organisations, including the INMO, and we get great support from them as well too. But there is great job satisfaction working in a role that is more philosophically aligned. We have greater professional autonomy within this role as well too, and greater diversity. We get to use all our skills, so we're not just an antenatal midwife or just a postnatal midwife, for want of another way of phrasing it. We get to use all those looking after one woman, so it keeps our skills very updated and present. But also we have great flexibility over our working day. So the bit that is, we can't obviously legislate for is when a woman goes into labour, but whether you want to work in the morning so you can be at home with your children, whether you work in the evenings after your children are home from school, all that can be worked out. It's your week and your day to just do as you wish. And obviously there's less burnout in that role, much higher job satisfaction and higher retention as a result. But because we do know, like as midwives, we really are, well placed. It is about, like, not, as I said before, promoting normal birth, it's about protecting normal birth. So, we have to, as midwives, we have to engage in this process where we support women to have normal physiological births. Definitely midwifery is on a tipping point as to whether, we become, we retain midwives in that whole role as it's described, or whether, our role is more aligned with obstetric nursing. So there is about, for us protecting midwifery, because when you destroy midwives, you also destroy a body of knowledge that is shared by women that can't be put together by a bunch of surgeons or male obstetricians, because physiologically birth doesn't happen the same way around surgeons, medically trained doctors, as it does around sympathetic women. And there's definitely a place in the environment for that as well too. So we do need to be actively engaging in the expansion of home birth and birth centre options. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Aisling. And I suppose I'm going to ask you as well, what do you enjoy most about your role as a community midwife?
Well, I enjoyed that. I love that every day is different. I love that I have great autonomy with what I do, that I can, determine my own workload and my own caseload and my own cohort of women. But actually that it just meets, it allows me to meet some of the values I have around midwifery, which is to respect choice and agency and, women's right to self-determine, where and how they give birth, and that as well too.
Thank you so much, Aisling, and thank you so much to our three speakers. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move on because we have come to the well past our finishing time, but we do have one last video to play. So thank you so much, Maurice, Karen and Aisling. I really, really appreciate it. And if anyone again is looking for any information from them, I'll be forwarding it on at the end of the session. So we're going to have Alison now again from Core Market, and we're going to have a video then just about their Let's Talk About It campaign.
Perfect, thanks Roisin. I won't keep you long at all. I just want to introduce the video to you. So at the annual delegate conference in 2021, we launched the Let's Talk About It campaign, which we ran with the INMO for INMO members. And it was all around nurses' mental health and what we could do, I suppose, to help. We noticed that there was a huge amount of claims on our income protection for mental health, and that's what was taking a lot of nurses out of work. So we ran this campaign. It was all about getting nurses and midwives talking about their mental health, creating a community of support, to provide access and support and practical advice, and to encourage members to take action to protect their own mental health when they needed to. So there was a lot of content involved. Nora Casey ran podcasts with nurses and midwives so that they could share their own experiences. And we also offered CBT courses to nurses, and 100% of those were taken up, and a huge amount of members engaged with it. There's still a lot of the resources available on our website. So I'm going to leave it there and let Roisin play the video. And I suppose just to take the opportunity to wish you all the very best of luck in your nursing career. I'm sure I'll be seeing you all throughout the years. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Alison. I'm going to play it now.
Very gratifying and accommodating career. I've been able to take some time off when my children were young and return to a career full of potential for opportunity, promotion, diversity. And I wish each and every one of you well on your respective future journeys. So today I would like to talk to you about minding your own mental health as you embark on your staff nurse experience. So as well as being a highly skilled role, nursing is also a stressful and demanding role. And nurses tend to have a tendency to take excellent care of other people and are historically not so good at caring for themselves or asking for help. So I'm hoping that by talking with you today, that you can learn to incorporate some important skills and techniques into your lives now that will support your mental health and well-being in your future lives and career. So during your internship placement, you will have experienced some of the challenges of nursing. You know, the unsocial hours, the long shifts, the unpredictability, the busyness, the physical demands, the emotional demands of people's illnesses, and the demands of having to deal with death. So how do you take care of yourself? How do you mind you? How do you seek help? I think one of the most important aspects of self-care in nursing is having a supportive network. Those people on whom you can rely to listen to you and to understand. Understand what it's like to be in your shoes. The power of talking for our mental health cannot be overestimated. Clearly, the best people to have around you in your network are each other, the nurses. And nurses have always been very good at supporting each other. But who else can you have in your supporting network? If you're struggling, can you reach out to your employee assistance program, your EAP, the confidential service available? Okay, or can you text INMO to 50808 to turn a hot moment cool by getting confidential support in text? Additionally, you can avail of one-to-one counselling if you feel you need that. How can you manage not to bring work home? You know, when you finish a shift, would you consider putting some systems in place for yourself to leave your shift behind you? This can be really helpful for you, not bringing work home. Some common methods are, maybe while you're changing your clothes at the end of your shift, that you consciously remove the shift with your uniform. And as you transition into home life, as you put on your day clothes. Some people like to visualize a shower, actually washing away the shift, letting the stresses of the day go down the shore. Other people like to simply breathe. Consciously breathe. Quietly, slowly, just being present in this moment. You can acknowledge that the shift is over. Whether it's the day shift or the night shift, I've completed my working day, my working night. Now I'm here, simply being present, breathing, and being mindful. And now I'm going. Burnout is a considerable consideration when you're working in a caring profession like nursing. And the causes of burnout, things like long hours and lack of adequate breaks, or the inability to say no, or holding in emotion, having high standards, and again taking work home, lack of hobbies, no self-care time. And I've already talked about how you can release emotion through talking, and how you can prevent taking work home by having some system or some procedure that you do at the end of your shift. But what else can you do to prevent burnout? You could plan to take regular breaks. It's really important to get into the habit of doing that early in your career. So plan your holidays, plan your breaks. What hobbies do you have? Have you considered how you might maintain your hobbies or introduce some new hobbies if necessary, now that you're going to be working, most likely be working on a shift basis? Hobbies that have nothing to do with work are very beneficial for your mental well-being because they're giving you an opportunity to completely switch off from your working life. It's also important to practice self-care. So how do you practice self-care? What do you do to take care of you? Another significant concern for nurses and midwives and those in caring professions is compassion fatigue. So what is compassion fatigue, or what causes it? Let's say what causes compassion fatigue. Well, we know that burnout can contribute to compassion fatigue, but a significant contributor to compassion fatigue is prolonged exposure to other people's trauma. Sometimes it's called secondary trauma or vicarious trauma. So when we're looking after somebody who has experienced trauma and that we are exposed to that trauma on a secondary basis over a prolonged period. Personal characteristics can contribute to compassion fatigue, and all these lovely characteristics that we like to see in nurses: empathic, heart-led, people who are willing to take on responsibility and have high standards. And often people who experience compassion fatigue are very well regarded by their colleagues. And they tend to be other directed in their care. So they're looking out for other people. So can you practice self-compassion? What is self-compassion? When the Buddhists wrote about compassion first, they talked about a kind and considerate approach to yourself and others. So the compassion was about self and others. Kind, considerate, understanding attitude towards self and others during periods of emotional pain. So how do you show self-compassion? How are you kind to yourself if you're going through emotional pain? We know that exercise is really good for our bodies, but it's also really good for our minds and our mental well-being. When we exercise, we release endorphins into our system, which help us to feel good. So can you plan to have some exercise in your life? You might say, gosh, I get loads of exercise when I'm on a shift. And that's true, you do. But taking planned exercise outside of work, where it's maybe outdoors or going to a gym, where you're using your body in a different way, exercising your body. Can you incorporate some of that into your life? That can be walking, cycling, dancing. There's so many ways that we can exercise and release endorphins into our system, which is really, really good for our mental health. Nutrition, also really important. So while it's very good for our bodies, it's also very good for our minds. So we know that eating fresh food, fruit and vegetables is really good for us. Can you incorporate that and make sure that you are getting a good, balanced, healthy diet? We know that sometimes, if we're tired, we'll take some sugar and we'll get a short-term rush, but we always have a slump afterwards. We know that alcohol is a depressant. So again, while alcohol might be, nice on the short term, we know that afterwards we can feel quite low, and that too much alcohol is really, really unhelpful for our mental health. Sleep is really important, and this can be challenging for nurses because of the way we work shift. So in terms of sleep, I would always say to people, to try and establish a sleeping routine, circadian rhythm, of going to bed at the same time every night and getting up at the same time every morning. And that's really good for our bodies, because our bodies then know, it's time to sleep. That can be difficult when we're working shift and maybe we're going on night duty and trying to establish a routine around nights and then get back to day duty. So just paying attention to sleep and making sure that you are giving time to sleep and to sleep well. That might be having to do things like having blackout blinds in your bedroom so that you can sleep during the day. It might be, trying to make other considerations so that you are allocating time to yourself to make sure that you're getting adequate sleep, because sleep is really, really important to our mental health. And again, I cannot overemphasize the importance of sleep and mental well-being. I've already mentioned breathing, as a practice, maybe when you're ending your shift and being present in the present moment, just conscious breathing. But I also want to mention breathing in relation to yoga, mindfulness, meditation, and how really good they are for us, for our mental health. That's something that you might practice. Would you even consider a 3-minute mindfulness exercise in the day? Just time where you stop. You're just present in this moment. You're mindful of what's happening in your body, what's happening around you, what you see. Maybe you like to close your eyes and just center in your body. Maybe you're not comfortable closing your eyes and just like to lower your gaze. Can you give yourself just a couple of minutes each day to just breathe, checking, give your mind a break. There's numerous research done on the importance of mindfulness and meditation for our mental health and well-being, and how it really helps us to stay well. Would you consider practicing gratitude? Again, numerous studies showing how effective practicing gratitude is for our mental well-being. Simply having a notebook by your bed at night and writing down 3 things that I'm grateful for today. It might be that the sun was shining. It might be that you met one of your friends and had a really nice time. It might be that you got a lovely walk in nature and you got to just be with trees and fresh air. It might be that when you were out for your walk today, you met somebody you didn't know who smiled and said hello to you. It might be that you achieved something that you've been planning for a long time. So gratitude can be about anything, but it's a wonderful habit to get into, practicing gratitude every day. Can you keep balance in your life? What is balance? How do I keep it? When I talk about balance, I talk about having a mixture every day, something pleasurable, pleasure, joy, something that brings you joy, something that's fun, something that you enjoy doing. With closeness, so some sense of connection with other people or other living being creatures like your pet. Pleasure, closeness, connection. And the third one then is achievement. So achieving something that gives you a sense of job well done. That again doesn't have to be monumental. That can be something really simple. It can be that maybe, you know, I've been saying for days that I'm going to start walking in the evening. Today we went for a walk. That's an achievement. It could be that you decided to cook a nice meal first with a friend. That's an achievement. Or it could be something that you managed to achieve in work that you wanted to get done. That was an achievement. So when I talk about balance, I talk about measure, closeness, and achievement. And if at the end of each day you can say that you had something that you enjoyed, and that you had some sense of connection, and that you had some sense of achievement, you have balance in it. Can you check in with yourself when you practice self-assessment? How am I getting? How am I doing? How am I thinking? How am I feeling? How do I feel in my body? What actions am I taking as a result of it? Just doing a general check-in. How am I feeling? That's what I do. What actions am I taking? Are the actions that I'm taking helpful or unhelpful? Am I doing things that are good for me? Am I helping myself? There are things that you want to achieve. It's what you are doing, achieving what you want to achieve. Or do you need to change in action? In terms of your mental health, what actions are you taking? When you think about your dental health, I'm quite sure that you practice something every day to look after your dental health. I'm sure you probably brush your teeth twice a day. You might floss. Maybe you organize your visit to the hygienist or the dentist. So what do you do every day to look after your mental health? Can you incorporate some of the techniques that I have suggested into your daily life to help you to look after your mental health? And be really, really helpful. Before I finish up, I just want to remind you about self-compassion as you launch into your career. Remember I said about the Buddha saying that compassion is a kind and understanding attitude towards yourself and others during times of emotional stress. So I'm reminding you and encouraging you to remember the self in compassion. And as you embark on your careers, to remember that you matter too. And to think, what can I do today for me? What do I need today? I hope that you can take something away from today that's been helpful for you. And once again, I'd like to wish you well and wish you a wonderful career, because nursing is a wonderful career. Thank you.
Now, everyone, thank you so much. That is just the video there, the Let's Talk About It campaign from Core Market, which I will link in the email that gets sent out to you when this is finished. So I suppose I just wanted to say thank you so much for attending. I really appreciated your attendance, everyone, all the speakers. It's been amazing. And thank you so much to everyone who took time out of their day to take part. We will be sending out links for all the speakers so that people can rewatch. And I hope if you have any questions, please forward them to me. And I hope you all have a lovely day, and apologies for going over time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rosie.